What made you straight up nope out of a relationship? I had a very long and toxic relationship with an ex. I had wanted to leave for years, but he would threaten to kill himself, and I would end up staying. I finally got the courage to walk away when I was diagnosed with several benign liver tumors and was told by the doctor that it was very important with this type of tumor to immediately and permanently stop taking hormonal birth control. I researched it on my own and confirmed the single most important thing I could do to avoid further complications was to stop taking hormonal birth control for good. I told my then husband about the appointment and he said, so calmly, well, that's going to be a problem. I was like, what do you mean? I'll go to the gyno as soon as I can get an appointment and we can just use condoms until then. Nope. Condoms were unacceptable because we were married, and not having sex until I got to the gyno was also unacceptable. What really made my blood run cold though was when he suggested that I should continue to take birth control as normal and just not tell the doctor. He'll never know, he said. Then he went on to suggest maybe I could go on and off birth control, so I'd be off of it before any follow-up appointments with this doctor, to ensure that he'd never know. I was totally stunned, and I just looked at him and said, you understand this could kill me? This isn't about placating a doctor, this is about my life. He just shrugged and said he wasn't using condoms and I needed to figure it out. I did figure it out. I left him more than a decade ago and have never been happier. I had a huge crush on her for a while, but never had the opportunity to talk to her given our weird work schedules. Then a friend from work sets us up. I was elated. First date goes really well, and we hit it off. We start spending as much time as we can around each other, talking on the phone every night, all the special things you do when you're starting a new relationship. Then she starts coming over more often unannounced. She would say for a couple nights, then a week, then 2 weeks. I would come home from work and she would be in my house, sometimes drunk. Thing was, she had almost been fired for an incident involving alcohol before and was lying to them about her sobriety. She would have a few too many, then go off about her family or how I wasn't taking our 2-month relationship serious enough. Final straw dropped on Valentine's Day this year. She gets annihilated to the point of not being able to walk on her own. After I refuse her drunk advances, she flips out. What followed was a couple hours of her threatening to drive home drunk, sitting outside so the cold weather would freeze her to death, laying in my bed and wailing my name till hoarse, and alternating between manic laughter and crying. 2 days later, once she was sobered up, I told her to kick rocks. We dated for just around 3 months. Quickest turnaround ever for me in a relationship. Edit. As awesome/horrifying as it would have been to have a horse in my bed, she did not transform. Her voice became hoarse. My husband of 5 years choked his sister and lifted her off the ground by her throat a couple nights ago. I'm not sticking around to see it happen to me. Eater. He was drunk and she smacked him because he was being verbally abusive to me and getting in my face. He turned around and tried carrying her up our stairs by her throat. After that happened, I was crying, grabbed my purse, and started walking for about 20 minutes before I called Mill Police. He stayed the night elsewhere and now wants to go to therapy with me. I've been trying to get him to go with me for months, and now that this has gone public and he could lose his promotion, he's finally decided to go with me. I told him I want a divorce yesterday, and I'm working on things I gotta do today for that to happen. Edit 2. Thank you all for the kind words. I'm trying to read through all the comments and reply when I can. For those saying it's fake, my video evidence suggests otherwise. I'm running around today doing what I can to get out, and I have a wonderful group of friends and family ready to help. And thank you guys for the awards. They're my first. As far as Mysel goes, she's 18 but still lives with her parents for now. She's trying to get out as well, but her mother bullied her out of giving a statement to the police and pressing charges. Her mom cares more about my husband's career than her daughter's well-being. Biggest nope of my life. Update. He's frozen my cards and now I have $100 to my name. I don't think I could hire an attorney if I even wanted to. Not romantic, but this guy is a residential assistant at my university, a student who works with security to help with issues on campus, and had been my friend since first year. When I first met him, I got bad vibes. I'd be mid-sentence talking about something I liked, and he'd pat my bed and ask me to sit with him. My flatmate told me to give him a chance, so I simply did. In second year, we went for a walk, and he spent the whole time insulting my outfit. It was a little different to what I normally wore, but I'd bought a new hat and was excited to wear it. He told me the hat didn't suit me and would suit him more. He took it off my head and wore it instead and just trashed my outfit. We get to a forest area while on our walk, and he tells me something along the lines of, if somebody assaulted you, you'd be completely defenseless. I told him that my chunky shoes would protect me as I could kick them, and he swept my legs out from underneath me to prove that I couldn't defend myself. He said, your shoes didn't help you there, did they? Later, while I was back home with my parents, he called me around midnight. He did a lot of fishing for compliments. Then he said, if you could have sex with me, you would. I'd told this person about my sexual trauma, so this hit pretty hard. I spoke to my mental health advisor at university, and he told me that that was sexual harassment and physical assault and I should report him. But he's an rap. He's the person I should be reporting these things to. I just avoid him now. Edit. Okay, I've read through some comments. I have a meeting with my mental health advisor who works with the university to talk about it more. It was good to hear from others too. There is unfortunately only one other currently, a good friend of mine who defended his behavior in my first year, so I'm not comfortable talking to him. We have limited staff on my campus as it's the rural campus for my university, but we do have security, so I think I'm going to speak to someone higher up soon. Thank you to everybody. The comments have been a real kick up the butt. Edit 2. I told a couple of you guys that I was going to get some pepper spray or something similar, just in case something like this happens again, but after researching it, they're actually illegal to carry in the UK. Update. I just spoke to someone on the accommodation team and they're going to pass it on to the wardens for me. Thank you everyone for your advice and support. Wouldn't really call it a relationship as it was only 3 dates, but I had met this girl at a wedding. She was a friend of a friend and we shared numbers that night. Texted for a while and then had a date. First date was probably a big red flag, but I shrugged it off. We had connected on Facebook and she noticed that she went to college with a girl I went to high school with. No big deal until I found out she had been messaging that girl and asking her all these questions about me in high school. Who did I date? What car I drove? Etc. Anyway, third date rolls around. I wasn't really sure how long we would be together, so typically I wouldn't have taken her to a really nice restaurant so early in a relationship, but I was in the mood for steak, so I took her to a pretty high-end steakhouse. I have never been more embarrassed by someone's behavior in public in my life, and I have a 6 and 3-year-old at home now. She sent 3 martinis back because they weren't made correctly, while being extremely insulting and rude about it. She ordered a steak medium and then got pissed because she insisted she ordered it medium rare. Both the waiter and I told her she had ordered medium. She was making comments about what other women in the restaurant were wearing, and not very subtly. Then, despite me trying to get out of there without buying her dessert, she got a dessert menu and expected them to make her something that they didn't have on the menu. They had cheesecake and she wanted chocolate cheesecake. Another outburst at the staff. On the way out the door she made a point to stop and complain to someone loud enough other customers could hear. When we got into my car I was so embarrassed I pretended I had left my credit card on the table so I could go back in. I gave the waiter an extra $20 and apologized, telling him I was dumping her as soon as I got to her place. He laughed and told me he wished he could see it. I didn't really give her a chance to say much. She called me a loser and stormed off. Haven't seen or heard from her since. When my so could not be happy for me in my success after 5 years of busting my ass to achieve my dream career, and me finally achieving it. Dragging myself through my depression day after day to fight against application rejections, isolated in a house I couldn't afford to leave and do anything meaningful due to where we lived, as I worked on my craft, indoors, at a desk. We didn't go out much. He never wanted to do anything when he got home from work, but drink and play games. Despite claiming to support me as a strong woman, his support flew out the window the moment I was finally becoming happy. I tried to bring him with me to the new city, since he hated where he was. I offered him a beautiful life together and change of pace he desperately deserved, especially for emotionally supporting me through my hardship, but all he gave me back was snarky jealousy of my position, entitlement, demands that I leave my job, negativity toward my new good friends, belittling my success as just my first job in this career, and refusal to come with me out of pride. He kept using his depression as a shield against taking responsibility for being a jerk, claiming it made him do it, but not doing anything to work on his depression. I left him 6 months into the new job when he truly didn't understand that I did nothing wrong in my happiness and he needed to handle his issues without taking them out on me. He admitted in the end that he didn't appreciate me and blamed me for his problems, but still refused to change his behavior. So I explained to him calmly why I could not continue and left without looking back. Nobody should have a cement block tied to their legs while swimming. I've been incredibly happy since. I kept having to call the cops to calm down my wife after she became addicted to a slew of prescription drugs. I told her doctors that opiates for a ruptured vertebrae, stimulants for ADHD, Ambien most nights to help her sleep and an assortment of others for anxiety and depression, and more to combat side effects, made her violent. One of the times that I called the cops to calm the situation down during a bad episode just made me cry. All he had to say was that he had already been there and asked when it would stop. I thought I'd been holding things together reasonably well. I had an office job where no one knew what was up, though my work had suffered greatly. I kept clothes and food in my trunk, just in case I had to stay out for a bit, because she had decided I was part of the conspiracy. I had a gym on the way to work I could where I could shower or just have some downtime. I did all of our housework and errands, because she couldn't work or do much of anything most of the time. Each time she cut herself she told the hospital it was an accident, and she always tried to go to a different one. We lived in a major metro, between hospitals. The cops saw through it. Being seen like that, and knowing that, even that lifestyle was running out hurt. I'm now recovering from the divorce, and enjoying the calm. I still sometimes panic for no reason, and I feel more comfortable with clothes and food stashed in the trunk, but I feel much healthier. I get more sleep. My blood pressure has normalized, for the most part. I don't cry at work anymore. Met a girl on Tinder. We went for a coffee date. Shared some of the same music tastes. She lets me know that one of them is playing at a local club on Friday. I suggest we go together and do dinner before. Friday comes. We do a late sushi dinner and head to this club around 10 for the show. Headliner, who we wanted to see, went on around midnight. Get to the club, finally get to the bar and order drinks, then head to the dance floor. She pounds the drink and says she is getting another drink. She comes back few minimum later with a new drink, gives me a kiss on the cheek and wanders off on the dance floor. I'm not someone who is overly possessive and figure my wanting to be in the back to get a full visual and auditory experience is not her jam. All good 20 minutes later I see her grinding on some dude. Now mentally, I'm already back at my car, but I want to see what happens when she makes eye contact with me. They start making out, and the guy notices me eyeballing them. She wanders off to get another drink, and he comes up to me asking if I have a problem. I explain the situation and he says something to the extent of "Sucks bro, she is with me now, fuck off." Took his advice and did. Called up a friend, and went to his house, and played cat until 2ish. Then my phone rings. It's 230 and she is calling me asking where I went. My car was missing from the parking lot. I told her I went home, and she was on her own to find a ride. I bet that guy you were making out with could give you a ride, to which she responded with which one we kissed once, made out 0 times. I laughed, hung up, and rolled for more bricks. I went through a lot with my ex of 4 years. I should have left him long before this. The final nail in the coffin was him crashing his car while faked on Xanax, alcohol, coke and weed. If I was in there with him, I would have been killed, 1000%. I told him that night he couldn't drive, and I begged him to stay at mine. This made him so angry, and he screamed at me, calling me controlling, and drove off. I found out that he'd crashed because he didn't call me to tell me he got home safe, and I had a gut feeling. After endless calls and him not answering, I went on his Find My iPhone to see it said he was in the middle of a field near his house. I asked his mum to go and see if he was okay. When she went there, he was upside down in his car in the middle of a field and was incoherent. I had to spend 2 hours getting different buses to get to the hospital he was in, just for him to tell me he hates me and I'm a crazy bitch for going on his Find My iPhone, completely ignoring the fact that maybe no one would have found him until morning if I didn't. Oh, and he also got his dealer to bring him in more Xanax and weed while he was in hospital for a week after the crash. This, along with his new drug addiction, is what finally got me out of my abusive relationship. Every cloud has a silver lining, I guess. Met this girl on Tinder. I should preface by saying I wasn't thinking with the right head. I found her super attractive, and we hit it off. About 2 weeks later, I invite her over on a Friday night to come chill with me. We chill, have a few drinks. It gets late, and I ask her if she wants to stay the night. She agrees. I had a bit too much to drink, so in my head, I didn't want to try anything with her, because if I was feeling faked up, this smaller than me woman definitely was too. Go to sleep, wake up, she's still here. I wake up early, so I just hang out for a bit until she wakes up. I don't have a car, but I offered, hey, let me know whenever you're ready, I can call you an Uber. She kinda brushed this off. We are talking for a bit, and she brings up for the first time how she doesn't have the best family life and isn't looking to go back home at the moment. My dumbass feels bad and lets her know she can stay another night if she wants. This happens. I give her space, since my sober attempts at flirting seem to have gotten shot down. One more night turns into damn near a week. I don't know what's wrong with me. Like I felt bad, but after a few days, it started feeling like she was taking advantage and my attraction for her slowly started slipping. The kicker. When she ended up leaving, it was at like 3 AM. I woke up to see she was about to leave with a hoodie I let her borrow. She was wearing my underwear and socks, since she hadn't brought more than a change of clothes. I groggily asked her with a half smile, "You about to steal my hoodie?" She answers, "Oh, you didn't want me to steal it?" When I tell you, I could feel the half smile on my face drop. It's crazy because as we were texting before we met, we were full on flirting back and forth. I really thought we were just gonna kick it and leave it at that, maybe make it a consistent thing. Nope. She never messaged me after leaving. I was fine with never talking to her again tbh, but I told this to my older brother. He told me to at least message her and let her know that I wasn't interested because I wouldn't like it if someone did that to me. I messaged her, she blocked me. End of story. We had only been dating for a few weeks, but it was intense and felt like there was a strong bond. I was away for a week, but I called her every day to see how she was doing. When I got back home, we were both very excited to see each other, so she came over with her dog. The dog, a pug, had apparently never been in anyone else's house, nor had she ever house trained her dog. I later learned that she had a full empty room in her apartment with pee pads all over the floor for the dog. So the dog is sniffing around my dog's bed and just peeing all over it. At first she was embarrassed, and I was a little bit annoyed, but didn't make a big deal about it. I grabbed a towel and tried to wipe it up. After the third time, I said something like, "Okay, it's time for dog's name to go home." So we left to head back to her place. Fast forward a few days, and we are at her place. The dog is just being crazy and so hyper. I offer to take him for a walk, and she rejects it. Instead, he goes into the second bedroom to pee on a pee pad. I'm silently judging the situation, but don't say anything. We go to bed, and she talks about the idea of getting the dog neutered. I said I thought it was a good idea, because it would mellow him out and maybe help his marking instinct. She exploded in anger, saying that she couldn't believe I was so mad about him peeing on my dog's bed, and that I totally overreacted, and just laid into me for a solid 15 to 20 minutes. I realized then that this person was potentially dangerous. I jumped out of bed, put my clothes on, and headed towards the door. I said I'm sorry that things didn't work out, and was about to leave. Her response was, "That's it?" and then she went back into her room and sulked. I tried to talk to her more, but she continued to yell at me and berate me about the dog and how I was such a shitty person for overreacting. I told her that I really did have to go. I never saw her again. Was dating a beautiful and intelligent woman from the Caribbean who had a daughter. We were so good together the first 6 months, even with all the external racist bullshit that comes with an interracial relationship. We were talking about getting a place together, somewhere a little more progressive. I was already helping her with her rent and had given her a credit card for emergencies since her finances weren't great, so it seemed like the logical next step. One Friday night we were at a reggae concert and the lead singer of the opening act singled us out, basically taunting me and complimenting her. Afterwards he slides up with his friends and attempts to hand her his number. She was smiling and beaming but then declines. I was expecting her to be a little more forceful in her ejection after this guy basically shit all over our relationship. The next day she asked if I could watch her daughter for a bit while her and the girls went to lunch. Her friends show up while I'm in the shower and one of them leaves her 2 kids as well. I come out to the living room and there's now 3 kids and nobody is answering their phones. I was already upset about her dismissive attitude with the reggae thing, but then a few hours turns into a 14-hour babysitting marathon because they didn't get back until 2 AM. She was super drunk and passed out while she was on top of me. Pretty bad Saturday night. I left and went to my house. I grabbed the pile of mail, since I hadn't been there for 4 days, and sat down to check through it. I opened my Chase credit card statement and it's almost $3,000. She used it to pay for her car insurance in full, new tires/repairs for her car, a shopping spree at a clothing store and various smaller purchases, all within the last month. I went to her house the next afternoon and she's trying to deflect everything. She suggests we drop her daughter at her friend's house, go to dinner and talk about it. I have no idea why I agreed, but there we were sitting outside a restaurant. I told her I expect her to repay everything she's charged to my credit card. Her response was the final nail in the coffin. I'm not paying anything back. If you want to be with a girl like me, you need to be paying for everything. I told her I didn't want to be with a girl like her then. She launched into a tirade of insults and told me that she still won't pay for the charges. She started basically bragging that I actually paid for her and her friends to party last night since she charged it all to my card too. I start my car and she gets really upset. What about dinner? I said she's welcome to go in alone, but I'm leaving and I want my card back now. She said it was at her home, so we went back. I packed up the few things I had there and surprise she refused to give me back the card. I warned her that it was a terrible idea to keep it, but she basically shouted me out of the apartment. Monday morning I contacted Chase and told them none of the charges were mine. A few days later she calls me, I'm assuming to apologize, but no, she's accusing me of stealing a CD. Seriously, a CD? I didn't hear from her until about a month later, when she was fuming about her insurance being cancelled. She was less happy when I told her all the other charges were considered theft as well. Chase basically covered or reversed the charges, so I paid nothing. Her insurance was cancelled, and I like to think she had to repay all the other charges to Chase or the shops. About a year later I was in my car and opened a CD case. Inside there were 2 CDs, including her missing CD. TLDR, X went from dream girl to gold digging trash in the course of a weekend. Ran up thousands on my CC and refused to return it. Got a free CD for my troubles. This is gonna age me. I had been dating her for about a year. Things were going great. When we started dating she had mentioned some friends of hers and there was one in particular she'd talk a lot about, this other guy. It kinda made me jealous because she'd hang out with him quite a bit, but whenever I was around he was always busy or working. So after a bit I said something to her and she told me I was being crazy. Then one day on AIM, he messaged me and was like, hey man, I just want you to know nothing is going on between us, we're just friends. After that he messaged me every now and then and always say we should meet one day, but there was always some reason I couldn't meet him. After a while I just got used to it and didn't think anything of it. Now a year later I'm at her house and a freak snowstorm came in and basically trapped me there for a few days. One day I wake up first, go down and get on the computer, and go to sign on to my AIM. There it is, his screen name saved on her computer, and there's no password. I sign on thinking I'm gonna find some evidence they've been hooking up, but what I discovered was even worse. Click here to get the JK. No really, I signed on and the only faking name on his friends list was me. I was the only person he had talked to, and for a second I was baffled and didn't understand what that meant. Then it hit me, she was him. She had made up her best friend from the moment I met her and made up all these stories. The reason I couldn't meet him, because he was my girlfriend. So yeah, I got catfished by my girlfriend for a year before catfishing was a thing. I confronted her, she broke down in tears and admitted she made up a friend because she didn't have any real friends and didn't want to seem weird. I told her we were done, but I was faking trapped there by a snowstorm. So in the next 3 days she convinced me to stay with her, and then later I tried to marry her, but found out she was cheating on me. This was back in January. She was a tenant at my house, and we stayed decent friends. But this was above and beyond anything I had experienced with her. Let's call her Brit. She read some tarot cards that said this was the season of moving. She informed me of this and I said, okay, so, are you going to move? She said, I'm not sure. I definitely want to move before Mercury goes into retrograde, and I want to do it soon. So she gives notice to move out in April. Fine. Then she gives notice for March. Then she asks if she can leave next week. You know what? Fine. Whatever. Sure. Move next week. I'll help you, GTFO. Then she changes her mind and wants to move in April, then March. I told her to make up her mind. She finally decides she wants to leave in 2 weeks. Okay, fine. Let me help you move out. She then decides that moving means vacation and that she wants to go to Hawaii to relax on the beach. I tried to tell her that there were plenty of beaches where we lived, West Coast USA, and she could relax there. Nope. She wants to be on a beach in Hawaii. Now, a few things to keep in mind. She is a broke single mom that is completely irresponsible with her money. She'll blow money on a whim and never has anything saved. It's a poverty mindset. Why save when there's always an emergency? I'll just deal with it when it happens. Now, there's nothing wrong with broke single women. I get it. Being a single parent is hard. But it's that she decides to dump her kid off with her ex, take the STEMI check and use that money to book a plane ticket to Hawaii, and say yo, I'll be back in 6 months. Landlord, can you hold my place for me at the house? I don't want to pay rent during this time, but can you hold it until I get back? I told her no. She gave notice. I already posted an ad. She's leaving. In other conversations I had with her, she expresses that she misses the freedom of not being a parent and wishes she could take back being a mom. She then informed her child that she would be gone for up to 6 months, but wasn't sure when she would be back. Her child was, understandably, devastated but took the news best he could. During the last few days at the house, I went over to do some normal maintenance housework. While there, her son was in my way. Move. God, you're always in the way. She shouted at him. Sorry. Her child said sheepishly. He moved and I continued about my work, but he was in my way again as I continued to work. Hey. Yo, you gotta get out of his way. God, you're so slow at everything. Jesus, would you move? He didn't reply and sulked off to his bedroom. I was thinking, if she's like this when I'm around, what is she like when I'm not around? After moving out completely, her son went off to his father's place while she booked it for Hawaii. When she reached Hawaii, she texted me that she was sorry for being so hasty in coming out, but hoped we could remain friends. I told her to fuck off and never contact me again. I assumed things were over. Nope. Within 2 weeks I got a request from 2 different landlords asking me for a rental reference for her. Like, is she insane? So she told everyone she was going to Hawaii for 6 months, then stayed there for 2 weeks and came back. What the actual fuck? I told the 2 landlords that I refused to give a rental reference and that I would not rent to her again. She requested a 3rd rental reference from me from yet another landlord. When that landlord asked me for a reference, I told him, could you kindly tell her to fuck off? She won't listen to me, but maybe she'll listen to a stranger. I never heard from her again. He would argue with me about the stupidest things, then announce the next day that our plans for insert thing that required advanced planning were off because he wasn't sure about our relationship. He had the opportunity to do that exactly once, causing me to lose $150 in non-refundable tickets because mysteriously it was his idea to go, but my job to plan and pay for it. We had a discussion about how that wasn't okay, but sure enough, a month later he did it again for a weekend trip he had originally suggested. The only reason I didn't lose money on the weekend trip was because I saw this bullshit coming a mile away and never booked anything. And sure enough, we got in a ridiculous argument about whether the Justice Department discriminated against minorities. Yes, he cancelled a trip over that, and when he was like, "I'm not sure about our relationship," I said okay, it's over, and removed my relationship status from Facebook. I know. Then he spent the next month making creepy remarks and trying to inappropriately sexualize the conversation. For instance, "Good morning, what are you up to? Oh, just finished masturbating." Seriously? Who does that? Until he asked me straight out if I wanted to get back together. I told him, no. Hell no. I have standards. You do not meet them. We dated a total of 6 weeks. And get this, we are in our 40s, and he was pulling out that middle school shit. I have never seen someone try so hard to torpedo a relationship he supposedly wanted to be in. He's been married before. Holy shit. TLDR, don't put your dick into crazy first date through a dating site. We had been chatting for a few weeks. I lived in Antwerp at the time and I invited her to a great jazz bar, D Muse, for anyone interested, to start off the evening. She knew a restaurant and would take me there afterwards. First of all, she was late. Not can't find parking late, but I have not left yet at the meeting time late. She asked me to order her something, and she would arrive shortly. There I was with 2 red wines and during the waitress looks of she stood you up. First thing she says is not sorry I'm late. It was I don't like your shoes. I usually wear very generic black leather shoes, the kind that really cannot be ugly or beautiful. In any case, she finishes 2 red wines like lemonade. She talks about her exciting day as a clothes shop manager, and we leave for dinner. At this point I have determined that I want to keep it short, but I was hungry as well, so I decide to stick it out. She could not find the restaurant she knew while roaming the streets of Antwerp. All of a sudden she yells, "Here it is." I have an inkling she was relieved to find a place that was labeled restaurant to save face. The place was brightly lit, tablecloth was plastic and the food was made with powder and hot water I think. The wine was apparently good, since we emptied a bottle. I had 1 glass. Finally I could go home, only to find out we were parked near each other. So we walked to the parking spot. We passed an erotic shop and she pointed out some stuff that, while designed for human orifices, looked terrifying. She said next time we can go there and buy each other a gift. Upon arriving at my car I said goodbye and went home. I logged on and saw her online. Relieved that she did not crash her drunkenness, I blocked her. She was smoking hot though. Honestly I held on for a while. Mostly out of fear of what she would do to me. She threatened to take my livelihood and my son. This was a woman I was married to for 10 years. At first we were very much in love. Then I joined the army, so I could afford to give us a better life. I went away for training for a year, came back to a completely different person. She cheated on me constantly, told me she wouldn't have sex with me because I was gay. I'm not gay, but she decided that was her narrative and held on to it. She would tell me I was useless, stupid and worthless. And then for a little while she calmed down, started being nice and even having sex with me again. Made it all seem like a mental health crisis. Turns out she had faked a few guys without condoms and wanted to keep her security blanket in case she got pregnant again. And she did indeed become pregnant. I was excited. I always wanted 2 or 3 kids, so the idea of a second child excited the hell out of me and made me temporarily forget all the bad stuff. Then she miscarried, and it was a bad one. blood all over the bathroom, and puke on the walls, and then I had to sit with her for 10 hours because the doctors lost the ultrasound and couldn't confirm the miscarriage. I have never felt so helpless, and it faked me up for about 4 years. In that time she started hitting me, telling me all her pain was my fault, and bullied me into a very one-sided open marriage where she could fuck whoever she wanted, but went into a jealous rage anytime I found someone interesting. So finally it's Christmas 2014. I'm damn near suicide at this point. Seriously considering my options and how I would do it while causing my death as painlessly as possible. A few days before Christmas I drop her off at the local mall to buy gifts. I ask her again, as I had 4 years, to please take some time to talk to me about the miscarriage and how I've not been able to sleep without flashbacks for 4 years, and how I wish she would consider couples counseling. Just like every time I had asked before, she tells me to get faked and that I'm the only one with a problem. I'm thinking, okay, well I guess this is my last Christmas. Then she says the words that change everything. I wish you'd grow a spine and stop being such a bitch. That baby wasn't even yours. It was like a light switch had been flicked. I asked her why she would keep that information from me and let me suffer for 4 years, knowing that maybe there was a slight chance that confessing that lie might give me peace. Her response, "What's done is done." I couldn't believe my ears. And on that last sentence she turned and walked away to buy me my Christmas present. My Christmas present was a Big Mac meal, by the way. She spent the majority of the present money for me on a $40 glass bong for the local drug addict that she was faking. So anyway, right after she left my thoughts changed from suicide to escape. I'm not sure why it was that the final bit of info she gave me changed my whole outlook. Why that one sentence was more effective than the cheating, the lies, the hitting and the verbal abuse. It's been 6 years and I don't have that answer. All I know is that at that moment I decided that I was done and needed a way out that didn't end with her getting 0 consequences, my life insurance and a lot of sympathy. I decided though that I would wait until after Christmas so my son could enjoy one final Christmas with his whole family together. So I waited. January 5th, 2015, day for my marriage. My wife had been at her drug addict boyfriend's house for a few days now. I get a phone call from her asking that I please take her and her boyfriend to the local courthouse that was a 30-minute highway drive away so he could answer to charges of assault and theft. At first, I thought, why on earth would I do that? Then it struck me. Every time I had ever mentioned divorce in the past, she would scream at me that I was a worthless piece of shit who needed to take my head out of my ass, throw her wedding ring at me, and run off for a few hours until I felt bad, and then she'd come home and forgive me for thinking so negatively about our marriage. This gaslighting happened a few times and most of the time it worked. I'd always be left trying to figure out how I came out looking like a bitch. So this time I decided I would break up with her in the car. My son was at school and I was on leave. She had nowhere to run while the car is zipping down the highway at 100 km per hour, so it was a perfect time. So we get about halfway there and I casually tell her I'm done. I'll help her find a place, give her the kid 5 days per week, and give her child support immediately. It was effectively cheaper than daycare, and I had to save myself before I could save my son. I have 100% custody now, but that's another story. Anyway, she's caught completely off guard and agrees to everything because A, she thinks she's getting a pretty good deal, and B, she doesn't have any other options. So she says, okay, if that's what you want. I tell her I do and that I'm tired of fighting. She asks me if there's anything she can do to change my mind, but I knew that would just be inviting more lies and abuse. So I tell her what's done is done. Mic drop. I drop her off at the courthouse and start driving home. On my way home I call my mom and in a huge emotional release tell her that I'm separating from my wife. My mom's reaction? Thank God. My first girlfriend in high school. Dated her for around 2 years. She was my first everything. First girl I ever kissed, cuddled, did the thing with, etc. She was super clingy, which is fine. Kind of overbearing, but I could deal with it. I had a very close childhood friend pass away halfway through my senior year. He was actually my first friend I met / had since moving to this city in early elementary school. She didn't know him well, and this was the first time I was dealing with death on this intimate of a level. He passed on a Wednesday night. I found out the next day after school. Skipped school that Friday to mourn. When I found out about his death, I asked for some distance that weekend so I could mourn and just be around people that really knew him so I could get through it. She complied, or so I thought. That Sunday, a couple days after his passing, and a couple days after not speaking with her again, mourning his loss, I get a text from her. These are the exact words that text contained. "Do you even love me? You're too busy mourning over your stupid friend to hang out with your girlfriend." Those words are permanently etched into my brain at this point, over 4 years later. I dumped her though, text on the spot, blocked her on everything, done. Couldn't even grant me the courtesy of letting me mourn alone. She spent the next month contacting me through newly generated numbers trying to guilt trip me back into the relationship through suicide threats and the like. Yeah. I was dating a woman for 3 months. We are both lawyers, so given our schedules, dating at that point usually consisted of staying at one another's place during the week and going out for dinner and drinks on the weekends. One day she tells me that there was a complaint, that she was drunk in court, and that there will be a hearing to determine if she can continue being assigned indigent clients by the state. For a solo practitioner, this was a huge part of her practice. I get a call from a doctor who asks if I've ever noticed alcohol being a problem for her. I said I had not. Perhaps we'd closed down a bar on a Friday night, but nothing problematic. Later that day, she calls me and asks to attend the hearing. I get there, and it has nothing to do with retaining clients. It is a civil commitment hearing. Apparently there were multiple complaints by both other returners in the courthouse and her clients. Now clients often complain that an attorney isn't spending enough time in their case. But when clients who are not paying for your services because the state is picking up the tab complain, that is a red flag. A judge that she argues in front of regularly hears, reads the formal complaints, and sends her to the state hospital for up to 6 months, with a rehearing in a month. She gets sent away immediately to the state hospital and asks me to look after her cats, as she suddenly won't be home for months. At first I feel badly for her, thinking the court must have gotten something wrong. I drive the hour to the state hospital a few times a week to visit her during no-touch visits supervised by a nurse. Because I'm a lawyer, the nurse had to stay outside a glass room. By the time she gets let out 3 weeks later, because COVID had hit in the interim, I had realized that all those times that we went out a little bit too late, it was because she wanted to continue drinking. I also realized that whenever she got lunch between court hearings, she was really getting vodka sodas. I pick her up the day she gets let out. On our drive back, I make a comment about being nominated for the Ex-Boyfriend of the Year award. She looks at me and says, "So you're breaking up with me?" Yup. Sorry, sweetheart, but after only 3 months getting sent to the state hospital against your will for any reason is sorta a deal breaker for me. TLDR, a woman I'd started dating got rip-roaring drunk, vomited on the floor of the bar, and accused me of raping her to my coworker. In '96 was a bartender, dating a girl who was borderline alcoholic. I didn't know her quite well enough to be sure yet. On her birthday night she and her friends ate and drank at a Mexican place, then came to my bar to pick me up after my shift. I was the early shift. The next bartender, a sketchy prick who I think had designs on seducing her, gave her a pitcher of Red Devils, so of course we don't leave. I couldn't drink at the time because I wasn't yet medically controlled with my epilepsy, so she went to work on it herself. She was already tipsy when she walked in, and she wouldn't listen to me begging her to leave. Then she throws up in the bathroom. Now, I'm off my shift, so it's technically not my problem, but the next bartender nopes out of cleaning it, saying it's your girlfriend, dude. I can't describe to you what it's like to clean up burrito/Red Devil vomit. Your imagination truly can't make it much worse than reality. So then she's feeling horrible about herself, weeping all over the place. I walk her home. She lives about 10 blocks from there. The whole time she's refusing to continue, sitting on people's stoops and wailing that she doesn't deserve me and to leave her there. I'm obviously not leaving her alone in this state. A 10-minute walk takes an hour. I get her up her stairs, put her in bed on her side, sit for a bit to make sure she falls asleep okay. I consider staying, but I don't have my epilepsy meds with me, which sets me up for a seizure. So I leave, going to a nearby bus stop. And I wait. And wait. No bus. It's pre-Uber and pre-cell phones, so I go back to my bar to call for a car service from there. I walk in, and the bartender looks at me like I'm the biggest piece of shit walking the earth. "I can't believe you just walk back in here after what you did," he says. As sketchy as he is, he's not confrontational, so I'm taken aback. I ask for clarification. He says that the girl called him and told him everything, how I walked her home and forced myself on her. She must have awakened and gotten angry that I wasn't still there, and that's how she took it out on me. I don't know. We never had an in-depth conversation about it. I broke up with her over the phone. I wasn't mature enough at the time to bring it up or to suggest that she get help. I just called her at work and told her it was over. Epilogue: there was a low-level mob guy named Cookie that was a regular of mine at the bar before and after this. Although he could be a bully, he could be a nice guy too. He was just one of those guys you had to deal with. Well, he stopped coming in at one point, and I didn't see him for months. Then he came in and said, "Hey, Mr. Limp Richard, we gotta talk." He always called me Mr. First name. Turns out he started dating the same woman, and she told him what I did. He stopped coming back into my bar because if he saw me, he would kill me. Then one night she told him to meet her at a local bar, known to be a cop joint. He went up to her and tried to get her attention by touching her elbow. She turned around, screaming at him about not touching her. The cops pulled him out of the bar and told him they'd kick the shit out of him if he ever returned. And that was the last he'd heard from her. So he wanted to come and apologize, I suppose, for believing her story. She was a faked up unit, and something terrible must have happened to her to make her like that. I still wonder how she is. Can't search for her on the internet, as I had long forgotten her last name by the time social media was ubiquitous. It had been toxic for a while, mostly with jealousy and a bit of a controlling streak from her end. Finally I got fed up. The straw that finally broke the camel's back happened when I was seeing my grandfather, who lived in the same city as her, which, for the record, was only 20 minutes from where I lived. Now, this girl and I had been together most of the summer and were getting ready to go back to university, where we lived in the same dorm. With the move-in date being in only a week, I told her that I had made a series of plans through the week to see family and friends before the semester started, but that she was more than welcome to join any of these get-togethers. While at my grandfather's, she texted me asking me to come over, but I reiterated where I was and that I had plans to be with some friends in an hour to see a movie, and that, again, she was more than welcome to join. I can't believe you won't make time for me. You're right down the road. Me, I told you about these plans like 2 weeks ago. I can go and pick you up, but I'm not blowing off my friends before I'm gone for the next few months. Is Jane gonna be there? Me, well, her and her brother are my best friends, so yeah. I don't want you going. Finally, I blew up via text and told her she was being unreasonable, jealous, and childish, that I was tired of her attempts at controlling me, and that I had never given her reason to distrust me despite her brush with infidelity months prior, when we were working on defining our relationship. Well, she didn't take that well. All throughout the movie, District 9, I think lol, she kept calling and texting me, and I just finally ignored it. At some point I told her I was done with her, and that I wasn't going to respond to any more of her tantrums. And that was that. Funnily enough, Jane and I did end up dating within the next year or so, a scenario that I was not anticipating, and was not on my radar in the slightest. My best friend from high school, we were both in town after I was done with college, kinda reconnected. There were two moments that hit me. She'd been on meth when she was out of town, moved out of state to stay with her dad when she was 17, but she stopped when she moved back in 2016. I moved downstate after a few months for a job, but we still talked, and I'd visit every time I was back home. She had a kid the next year with this guy who dated her stepsister in high school. Summer 2019, I saw her for the first time in 6 months, and she was obviously back on meth. And talking about how she had to be on the right amount of drugs to take care of her daughter. I couldn't handle that. I just ghosted. Should I have called CPS? Her baby daddy wasn't okay either, and I wouldn't be there or the fallout, or to help, was my place. My grandma died next May. My ex-best friend sent a letter, care of the funeral home. I was feeling like shit, and I missed her, so I opened the letter. I got through about 2 lines of how hard her life had been in the last few months, and I put it back in the envelope. It's 5 feet away, a year later, and I still haven't read it. I don't doubt her life had been shitty. She did a few months in rehab, but Jesus. She sent it to the funeral home. I haven't heard from her since. She follows me on Tumblr, but I'm not sure she remembers it's me. She turned it into a cam girl account. Every time I go through my followers for bots, I scroll past. I guess I'm waiting for a third shitty thing before I block her. We were dating for 6 months. He kept breaking and pushing my boundaries. I was already on my last straw. For me, my diary is huge. It's a way for me to get out my most traumatic thoughts in a safe place where there will be no judgment. It lets me vent and helps keep me sane. From the very beginning I made it clear that my scribbler that I used for the diary is not to be touched. Moving it's fine, but I mean looked through or used for paper, and that I use it to house things that have happened to me that I'm not ready to have people know about. He said he understood, but as time went on and boundary breaking went on, I started to get a feeling that he was reading my diary. He was an extremely jealous person. I couldn't be friends with people of the opposite gender, even if it was always fully platonic. So I knew to catch him all I'd have to do is make a short and vague entry about a friend of mine, and that he would snap lol. So one day I write about an old friend who I missed and want to reconnect with. I said they were a great person, and I'm lucky to have even known them. This worked perfectly. He started a fight a day later, and while all hell broke loose, and he threatened to pepper spray me as well as tossed me around, he admitted to reading my diary, and in that moment I told him we were done and never getting back together, because that is the last straw. He continued to harass me for months after, but eventually quit after I moved on. The guy was insane. I'm so glad I'm out. Went to finally visit the home of a girl whom I was told by both my friends and hers had a bad crush on me for years, but whom I was just trying to be nice to. We shared most of the same route home from school anyway, and it'd be rude to refuse to walk with somebody and then walk the same path as them to get home. I'd also asked her to be my date to a high school military ball, JROTC, once because I wasn't allowed to have a girlfriend while in school, but thought I could at least have a platonic date there. We danced and took pictures, but didn't kiss or anything, besides on the hand of course. I thought we had a swell time. Went to visit her house and her very traditional Mexican family greeted me like a long lost family member, even though I'd never met them before, and promptly tried to force feed me all the foods. That was cool, and although my stomach disagreed. Anyway, while I was being polite and trying my damnedest to clean my plate and declining more as best I can, needed her brother to translate as they don't speak much English, and I'd failed Spanish twice. I happened to look up at the mantle. There in the living room for all to see, mounted right along with pictures of the family and great grandparents, and dead in the center was a picture of me and her from military ball. I found out later her parents were actively encouraging her to date me and get married / be knocked up by me, since I was deemed by her parents to be successful and smart. Because I'm Asian, I was her average B to C+ student in school. I refused to have my picture taken without any males also present, or only females, for years after that. Not as bad as most responses here, but my family was also very traditionally minded, and the wrath from my family had made me afraid for all too long. I'm a lot better now, obviously. Went through my rebellious manho phase when I got away from them after a while, before meeting my amazing wife and never wanting anyone else but her. An English woman I was interested in was basically so tone deaf about culture, history and her own country's origins that it downright disgusted me. She, a white well-off highly educated English woman, said anything that isn't the white heteronormative male is female to me, a Pakistani minimum wage earning man working 2 jobs and studying all while on a £20 per week budget because rent is crazy in London, UK. She proceeded to act like our experiences are exactly the same, which I took exception to. She rebuffed any attempt to self-reflect, at which point I got annoyed and asked her how many times she's been stopped at airports, how many times skinheads have threatened to stab her, how many times she's heard, "Go back to your faking country," how many of her ancestors were house workers getting raped or working as slaves, how difficult was it for her as a British woman to have access to the decent jobs that I wouldn't even get a second glance at, how many times people walked the other direction when she was walking towards them in her own building. I also asked her how it was like being an atheist living in the Middle East, knowing that you could be outed and killed at any moment, or your gay friend might be arrested any day when you're hanging out together. Basically, she had bought into the whole rich white female feminism thing to such a degree that she thought she could speak about the experience of other races, genders, orientations, and cultures from a place of authority. Last I checked, she's teaching feminist theory at a decent college. Fuck you, Ms. H. James, you dim-witted little bigot. A girl I had been dating for 6 months, but talking to for around 10 months, was slowly pulling out of our relationship emotionally. Though, I suppose that is fine, as I was beginning to notice a few red flags, mainly with drinking, something I suspect she gained from her parents. One day I came over after having not seen her for a weekend where she was ridiculously quiet, and she said all she did was clean her place and see her sister. There was something crazy like 6 empty 24 packs of beer. On Halloween we went to a party for her 2 daughters, but neither her son, 14ish, nor I wanted to be there. Her son asked about going home, and I said I'd be happy to stay at the house with him. So she dropped us off and went back to the party, saying she would be back home in like 2 hours because she really didn't want to be there either, and this was for her daughters to socialize. 6 hours later, around 2 AM and 0 texts later, nor did she answer her son's phone call. Both of us worried. She finally shows up. She smelled like smoke. She was supposed to be stopping and was obviously drunk, which means she drove her 2 daughters home drunk. I made a passive question about drinking, and she said she had like 5 or 6, which was the hash of beers I took for us, but I suspect she had more. I don't recall exactly what happened, but I made some sort of face to her response, I guess, and she flipped her sheet on me about how it wasn't my place to question her, and that she was an adult. I should have ended it here, but we had plans a week later to go on a trip with my mother. It was a birthday thing my mom wanted to do, and she had offered to pay for the hotel room, so I felt kind of stuck. The moment things ended was after a trip, which was 100% not planned. We got into a huge fight driving down, and then the following 2 or 3 days were actually really good, and I thought we actually made some real progress. The trip was really rough, but driving home I felt relieved. Once we were nearly home, she had a lot of conference calls to take on the drive home. I told her I was willing to give her some space, which is something she had asked for recently. My only request was that we still spend the holidays together. She flat out refused. I spent 10 months of my life on her, and she just refused to letting me spend time with her and her family on the holidays, and with everything else I had finally hit the wall. When we got back to her place, I grabbed my stuff and said it was over. She stood there waiting for a hug, and I started walking away. She was like, "Is that it? Yeah, what more do you expect?" She blocked my number and all my other social media. Started talking to this man. I think he must have been the same age as me, maybe a year or so older, 20 to 21, because we were interested in learning each other's languages. Exchange numbers. He's in a different city, but the same country, and is very adamant on meeting. So we do in my city. I end up paying for all our drinks even though I didn't even want to go out in the first place. He starts massaging my shoulders on a bench outside, which I found weird, and proceeds to take me to a closed mall to force his tongue down my throat. I kind of laugh it off and push him away even though I was mortified, and he continues to try and get me to take him to my house. Mind you, I still live with my parents. basically announces we're together now, and heads back to his student dorms. The following days/weeks were super weird in terms of texts and calls. One day we are supposed to meet and he bails, but I say it's NBD, because I'm sick anyway. Then I suddenly get a text that he's in my city in a bus to my house. I tell him again that I'm sick and won't be going anywhere, but he can come watch a movie if he wants. I only allowed him in because I felt bad for the time and money he spent coming here. Worst decision of my life. I end up getting raped. Mind you, I was a virgin at the time, and he also lied about using protection. Gotta say that was a pretty big nope for me. I was so shocked I truly wasn't even present anymore. He dragged me into the shower and made me clean myself, and then after wanted me to buy his ticket home and bring him to the station. I had to buy Plan B the next day with the neck black and blue all over. Was extremely sick for a good week after. Still not over it after a few years. Fun fact, he tried to play it off as consensual SCH when he texted me a few times after. Now I may be dim, but when someone says number 700 times and actually punches you, I don't think that could mean consent to anyone. He said he'd see me to apologize, but instead just ghosted. Until a year and a half or so later, when he suddenly messages me on Instagram with this girl, as if we are old friends. Called him out for being disgusting and blocked him. So many red flags you'd have thought he was digging over a gas line on a golf course. First date. Dude asks me to meet him in the city after work. We've been chatting on OKC for about a week. We get along well, and he seems nice. But I don't like the city, especially at night. And parking is insanely expensive. I tell him that, and he makes up some dumb excuse about loving the lights or something, and tells me he will pay for parking. I agree. I show up, and this dude is way too well known at both bars we went to, like, beyond regular status, and not just by the staff. It's a little eerie, but I shrug it off. Maybe he's a popular guy. He asks to take a picture of me. Not with me. Not that it would have been much less creepy, honestly, but of me. As soon as we sit down, he starts going on about how his friends would never believe he was with someone as hot as I am. Then he starts calling me the unicorn, because I worked as a junior engineer, play video games, and love horror movies. It gets obnoxious fast. Like he doesn't use my name, just refers to me as Ms. Unicorn 5 minutes in, and he asks to kiss me. We haven't even gotten our drinks yet. I decline. He introduces me around the bar, to everyone, as Ms. Unicorn. I wonder if he has forgotten my name. He asks to kiss me several more times. At one point, he goes to get more drinks. He comes back and presses weirdly close to me when he drops my drink off. Instead of setting it down in front of me like a normal human being, he kind of leans around me and presses up against me in a thinly veiled attempt to feel me up. I feel his erection against my leg. I'm repulsed. I try repeatedly to end the night early. He has excuse after excuse. Waiting for someone who owes him money, wants to see the score on the game, blah blah blah. Eventually I shrug and say fine, and just leave. He races out and catches up to me on the sidewalk to walk me to my car. When we get there, he gets in the passenger seat. I ask what in the actual fact he thinks he's doing. He explains that he can't drive right now because reasons which certainly aren't getting his license suspended for a DUI. He tells me I need to drive him home since he didn't get what he paid for, stating that he meant the expensive parking, implying he meant me. I grimace, but whatever. I agree to drive him home. When it comes time to pay for parking, he does not have nearly enough cash and no card. I'm forced to pay. He lives almost a fucking hour away. He most definitely did not tell me that. Too late now. On the ride home, he tells me he's in love with me. Dude has spent a grand total of 2 hours with me, including the awkward car ride. I tell him he needs to stop. He insists. He says he just knows, and that he can tell I have a beautiful soul. I vomit in my mouth a bit, metaphorically speaking. Eventually we arrive at his creepy, rundown house. I pull into the driveway and tell him goodnight. He tries to kiss me. I push him away and tell him to get out of my car. He starts to cry. I repeat, get out of my car. He goes on a sobbing tirade about how his heart just gets in the way and he falls in love too soon. He proceeds to start punching himself hard in the chest and legs. I tell him again to get out. Suddenly the porch light pops on and an older woman comes out. He gasps, "Sorry, I live with my mom. I didn't tell you in case you wanted to come in." Snot muffles his half as apologies. "Get out. Now." He starts begging me to give him a chance. I roll down my window as his mother approaches. "Please get him out of my car." She opens the passenger door and tries to pull his arm. He swats her away, then slaps her hard. "Come on, name. You can't be doing this to girls all the time. Come on inside now." She is undeterred by the slapping. He is still in my car. "If you don't get out right the fact now, I will call the police." That seems to snap him out of it. Or maybe into it. He stops crying and lets his mother drag him from the car. I pull out at lightning speed and catch a glimpse of him running after my car in the red glove tail lights. Nothing in the world would have made me stop. I've got a degenerative condition and have known since my late teens I'd end up eventually as a wheelchair user. I'd always been very clear about that really early in relationships and said, if that's not for you, no hard feelings, but let's not waste each other's time. Things with my ex were hard for a lot of reasons, but I cared enough to stick around and try and make it work. I loved him. Part of me still does. We were together for 5 years and the first 3 were amazing, but towards the end my health took a major dip. He'd known what my future looked like and had reassured me that whatever it brought we'd face it together. He could be really sweet about it, but at other times I was made to feel like a huge burden. After months and months of poor health, sheet loads of pain, little spiteful obelisk comments etc, I was reaching my limit, but I still wanted to try and get us back on track. I'd noticed I wasn't getting invited along to things as much, plus his friends were complete drunken assholes, but I honestly thought we could get past it if we were both invested enough. Then one day we were walking somewhere with a friend of mine, his brother and his friend, and I found I was getting left behind. For each step I took they could take 3, and not one person looked over their shoulder to see where I was at. I stopped fighting to catch them up and just went at my own pace, but I realized that day that I'd be better off walking alone than always being 3 steps behind. I saw that this would be my future if I keep these people, and more importantly him, in my life, and that I deserved so much more than that. A few days later I told him I was done and dumped the friend too. It was a small thing to be a breaking point, but I discovered I had more dignity and self-respect than to be begging for the attention and support of those who apparently cared about me. Best thing I ever did. Pretty mild reason to nope out compared to many, and I've put up with a hell of a lot in both this and other relationships, but this is always the one that sticks in my mind. I told my ex that one time I greened out over smoking weed and said I was never smoking again in the same manner people said I'm never drinking again. 2 years later, I smoked a few puffs of a joint with a close friend and had a much nicer experience. I told my ex about it and he immediately got angry and said that he was okay with his friends smoking and other people smoking, but not his partner. He threatened to break up with me if I had smoked a bit of weed ever again. I asked why didn't he mention this deal breaker before, and he said that he already heard me say I'd never smoke weed again and assumed that I wouldn't. After I broke up with him, we were long distance. When I wasn't living with him for a while, he took my parrot's birdcage, which was a gift, with his dad. He told me a month later that he took it when I was about to gather my belongings from our apartment as I was moving out. He said it was his since he paid the $100 for it without me knowing. My parrot, who had been living in it for 9 months, was now homeless. After the situation, my friends told me he ended up calling girls pretty behind my back, even though I had confronted him about it. My close friend also told me that he was trying to talk to him behind my back, saying we just got into a fight and that everything I was about to say was crazy, and that he hoped that they were still cool with each other. I found out that he was thinking of breaking up with me for a while behind my back, but said he would never be the one to break up with me to my face. Kind of long and, ultimately, uninteresting, but good cautionary tale for someone. Easily one of the hottest women I'd ever dated. The sex times were like a porn shoot. Barbie doll party girl. Big drinker. I found it hard to keep up, but I kept her happy by going out every night and getting basically blotto. We both had kids. I had my own place. She was living with her mother. I had my 2 young kids every free son. Her daughter lived with her ex's mother, and she rarely saw her. She eventually moved in with me, and when she did I surprised her by having a room all set up and ready for her young daughter. She asked why, which I thought was strange. Our lives were very different. I had a decent career job. She had lost her part-time job at the finish line that she only had because a relative was the manager. Was no angel, but it was important of me to see my kids much as possible. She just liked to party. We had very different lives. But boy did I think I won the lottery. Because blue-eyed blondie doll was a hottie. Everywhere we went, people stared. Felt so lucky. Like a douchebag. So, yeah, we had very different lifestyles. She had compromised with me by staying home on weekends and having her daughter with us, which she always claimed she dreamed of, but never had a proper place for her, and I brought her out drinking every other night of the week. Got to keep that hot party girl happy, and we would get absolutely wrecked. I was having a tough time keeping up and remaining responsible, but I kept at it. Hey, she was a hottie. The last straw was when she told me she wanted me to take my kids less because she couldn't handle having kids, including her daughter, every single weekend. When I found myself considering it for a moment, I had become a drunk for her, and it had started to affect my thinking. I realized it was just not going to work. I told her she shouldn't ask me to choose between her and my kids because she would lose. She couldn't believe it. She said she would be willing to take her daughter every other weekend and just go out and drink by herself on the weekends I chose to keep having my kids. I told her to start packing. To this day, years later, I still can't believe I had considered seeing my kids less just to hold on to her because I was so enamored by her hotness. I thought I was lucky. Today she still works cheap jobs and she never again ever had her daughter with her overpass. She continued that lifestyle. As you can guess, she ain't so hot anymore. Still a skinny large-breasted blue-eyed blondie party girl, but the years have not been kind. Ever hear the phrase rode hard and put away wet? Well, she now looks like what you'd expect. Over-tanned, druggy teeth, 40-year-old drunk who acts like she's still 18. Her life is, and has always been, a wreck. The Bufflers still love her, though. A few years ago, I got a call from a friend I hadn't seen in about 2 years. He didn't sound right. Said he was in a resort area of the state I live in, with his new wife. I didn't even know he got married. We had just started talking, and I could suddenly hear a woman talking loudly non-stop in the background. I did some quick thinking, and realized he was in some kind of trouble. Told him I was going to come see him. He started hemming and hawing, said I couldn't come, and that he had to do this and that. I just kept on insisting, and I kept moving the goalposts on him. Finally, after a pause, he said only tomorrow would work. Probably thinking I couldn't make the 4.5-hour drive on such short notice. I said yes, and that I'd be there tomorrow afternoon and hung up. I then got in my car and drove there, right then and there. When I got there, he and his wife were putting the last of their things into a small U-Haul. He was a shell of himself, emaciated, bruised and mentally spent. I immediately ran up, gave him a big hug, put him behind me, and faced a woman that was half devil. She tried acting friendly, but was seething underneath. She knew who I was, and she tried to engage in small talk. I ignored her, and asked where my friend's stuff was. She then got pissed, and starting posturing, and said he didn't own shit. I put my friend in my car, and started going through the U-Haul, and grabbing anything I thought might be his, while keeping a close eye on the woman. Mainly I got his 2 good guitars, some clothes and shoes. Come to find out, his call to me was the last straw and it almost didn't work when she walked in on him in the lobby of the cheap motel they were staying in, calling from the motel phone. By the time I got him, he was basically her slave. She regularly beat him and berated him constantly. She had told him she would kill him if he tried to leave or if he told anyone about them. He probably weighed 135 pounds on a good day, and when I got him, he was probably about 110. The whole dynamics of their relationship How it began and evolved is a story unto itself. However, he said until about 2 months before, this whole abusive situation seemed normal to him. It wasn't until she started pushing her loaded gun into his face regularly that he started seeing the nightmare he was in. When he first gave her an inkling he wanted out, she beat him so badly, he became unconscious. She would then put so much fear into him, on a daily basis, that he could barely hold a rational thought. When I got in the car and drove off with him, after rescuing him, he just cried for a couple of hours. He told me he was sure she was going to kill him pretty soon, and he only called me because he had come across my office number on a piece of paper in a book he was putting into one of those little free library boxes outside the motel office. We mostly drove in silence because he was completely drained. He stayed with us for a couple of months and then left for his home state. It took him a year to get somewhere close to normal. Thanks for the award. That was very kind of you. Around late 2015, I wasted a few months dating this girl. 3 months in, one day, I got sick and was totally feverish, dizzy and all of that, so spent the whole day in bed. Didn't go to university of course. She, at the time, lived very near me, and even her university was near my own. We were talking via WhatsApp at the moment, of course. I told her how I have been feeling, and that I stayed home for the day. She told me she had a lot of homework to do, so she was gonna go straight home to study. I was okay with that, wasn't gonna ask her to come see me if she had stuff to do, no problem. When she got home, she hit me with a weird message. She says I saw you walking through the street with a faking open palm emoji, like saying oops, caught. I was baffled. I said, I've been dying in bed all day though. She insisted she had indeed seen me walking a few blocks away from where I live. Suddenly I began wondering if I had a doppelganger. I insisted that I've been in bed all day and that maybe she got confused. That's when she said something that instantly made me explode. I was walking from the other side of the street. I know it was you. Okay, so you're telling me you saw your boyfriend on the other side of the street and you didn't even greet him? Of course I asked her that, and she answered, I thought you were going to a friend's house, so I didn't bother you. I know I'm making a lot of emphasis on emojis, but she always used them to express herself, and those emojis were of course like UHH excuse me? My women intuition is telling me you're totally wrong. So I told her, you know, if you want you can come to my house to check for yourself. I've been here all day long. I'm still in my pajamas and my mother can confirm I haven't gone out. She answered, nah, it's okay. I believe you. I snapped, said, fuck you and blocked her. Haven't spoken with her since. Girl I met in college. I knew she had an interest in me since the first day I met her. Let's just say that it was pretty one-sided. Firstly, she had this vision that her love life must be something akin to that of a Korean drama. She was constantly acting overly timid and shy, and kept putting me in situations where I was supposed to be the dependable and confident hero figure. She was extremely clingy, glomping onto me if I was anywhere within a meter radius from her, and expected me to do everything and anything that seemed "gentlemanly" to her. I'm a nice guy, so she was probably under the impression that I was doing it for her. Every week during our 2-month relationship she would message me about how our zodiacs are so perfect for each other, or how she's thinking of me. We had pretty much no shared interests between us, and our ideologies were completely different, in the bad way. It got to the point that she would get flustered or mad if some other female even looked at me. I have many girlfriends, and she was trying to get me to ignore them for her sake. I do something simple like fix the chain inside a toilet so it flushes properly, and she immediately starts boasting to her friends about how smart of an engineer I was. I'll be honest, I do feel pretty bad for her. I never stated that I'm her boyfriend or that I consider her my girlfriend, and I even reminded her so every now and again. She obviously never had a relationship with anyone before, and probably dreamed of having a strong and gentle protagonist of a boyfriend. I just went along with it in the hopes that she would realize that we weren't compatible, and I was perfectly fine in being her test subject. Better for her to practice and fail on someone that wouldn't work than on someone that would. Moved out to Arizona and got married. Way too fast. Only knew her for like 4 days. Around 2 months into the marriage I was at her parents' house and they asked if I could go get their mail. I did. Why not? But when I got it, I noticed their mailbox was crammed with mail that had to have been a few weeks worth. Now, I wasn't snooping on their mail, but it's hard to miss a couple dozen letters with big red final notice written across them. When I got back, my mother-in-law told me they had been dodging collections for months. They lived in what I would call a small mansion, with yacht, swimming pool with a waterfall, indoor pool room, etc. I found out over the next few days that they essentially would live like royalty until the money caught up to them and then skip out and move when they couldn't outrun the bills and do it all again somewhere else. Fast forward another 7 months. I literally saw my wife throw a full-on tantrum fit on the bed, laying on her stomach, kicking her feet, and slamming her fists into the bed, screaming and crying her eyes out. What was it about? She was wailing on about how it wasn't fair, that she had to pay bills and take care of responsibilities first and then do the things she wanted to do, like go shopping, play games, eat out at 5-star restaurants, etc. I stood there in the bedroom watching this half-hour-long tantrum and just thought, oh fuck, this is not going to be a good thing for our lives. At the moment the last few months of experiences came together and I realized she was just like her parents, and if I stayed, that was probably going to be us. I noped out of that relationship real quick, divorced, and on a plane back to Texas all in the span of 3 days. The marriage ended as quickly as it began. I dated a girl for 2 years. Everything was fine, was a normal, healthy relationship. I lived on campus and she lived nearby in an apartment with her sister. Her sister was moving out because she was graduating. My girlfriend asked me to move in with her. I said I wasn't ready for that kind of commitment. I had plans to go back home for the summer, only 90 minutes away, not like we were doing the long distance thing. We still would have seen each other a lot. Also, we both only had 1 year of school left, and I said I was happy to revisit the idea after graduation. She completely changed. She started drinking heavily almost every day, which was something she never did. She was rude and passive aggressive, and started to get hurtful and mean. Then one night at a party we were playing cards with some friends and she punched me in the side of the head totally out of the blue. Everyone around us went silent. I asked her why she did that, and she answered, I felt like it. We spent the night in my room on campus and the next day I told her we were done. It was a long fight with a lot of crying, and she begged me not to dump her. She said my decision not to move in with her really upset her, and she wasn't dealing with it well. After a lot of talking I agreed to not dump her, but I told her I needed some space and didn't want to see her for a little while. We spent almost all our free time together up until this point. She agreed. That night she showed up at my room completely trashed, like falling over drunk. No idea how she got there. I took her in, and she was climbing all over me trying to kiss me and take my pants off. I told her no, got her to my bed, and tucked her in. Thinking she was out cold, I got a glass of water for her and put it beside the bed. I turned to leave my room and the glass shattered on the wall in front of me. It just missed my head. She said something about me being a loser and passed out. I spent the night in a friend's room, and when I got back in the morning she was angry. She accused me of cheating on her. I didn't. I played video games with a friend, then slept on his floor, then broke down crying after throwing up, and started all over with the apologies. I sent her home and told her never to contact me again. She tried a few times, but I ignored her. I don't know why she changed so drastically, and wish I knew. I really loved her and saw a future with her. Not my proudest moment, but I was in a very toxic relationship with a girl who was extremely manipulative, violent and unbalanced. I took a lot over the 3 years we were together and should have found a reason to leave a lot longer than I did, but I eventually found my revealing point. She cheated on me, and I had a suspicion, but couldn't prove it. After about 3 weeks of prying I finally got her to admit she had been seeing her ex behind my back while I worked. I managed a bar, so I was at work till 6 AM on weekends, while she was working a 9 to 5 during the week. After finding this information out, I was obviously mad at first, but for some reason I let her convince me to give it another chance and really work at the relationship. The only catch was she wanted to continue to see her ex as well. She wanted to see me during the week and him on the weekends. We lived together at this point, by the way. Needless to say, that was the best thing she ever did for me. It's sad to admit, but not until that exact moment did I realize I was wasting my time and needed to get fo. I moved out in the middle of the day while she was at work. I left everything except my cat and my bed my parents got us for Christmas. It was worth starting over. I never felt more free in my life. Hands down the best thing that ever happened to me. I should have walked out of that relationship a long time ago, and I kept making excuses for her. I met my soulmate 6 months later and have never been happier. I spent a lot of time in toxic relationships and never thought anything like this was possible. To anyone out there, don't cheat yourself. Stop making excuses for your so toxic and cheaty behavior. A healthy relationship will change your life in the best way. This guy I met when I was very young, and he was almost an adult, spent years trying to get with me. He was a high school student who worked at the gifted and talented forensics camp that I attended every few months from 5th grade until high school. At first it seemed somewhat normal. He paid extra attention to me, helped connect me with other resources on the material. Then he became more forward as the years went on, asking me over to his house to swim, offering to drive me and my friends places. I never accepted because it felt weird, and he never pushed. He went to college nearby, so kept working at the camp and always requested to work with me. No other adults thought it was weird, they all thought it was cute and teased me for having a crush. I don't think I actually did at the time. Fast forward to my junior year in high school, 11th grade, all my friends start dating and stuff. I'm cute but fat and very focused on getting to my dream school, so don't have a ton of offers. Plus I'm a year younger than everyone else, which doesn't help. One weekend I'm at a party with some friends and forensics guy, FG, is there. We get to talking, and he tells me I've grown up beautifully, and he always knew I would. Basically fat girl kryptonite. He asks me to go somewhere quieter with him, and I like the idea of being seen as desirable by a hot older guy, so I go. We are hanging out in a home office in a stranger's house, and he makes a move, so I go with it. I liked kissing him, teenage hormones and all, so we made out for a while. I get a text from my friends letting me know it's time to go, so I make my excuses and give him my number. He asks me out, and I say yes, because hot boyfriend alert, and plus I have no idea how this is supposed to go. We started dating, and for the most part it was all online and by text or phone, because he was in medical school. We finally find time for an in-person date, and it goes really well. So we schedule another one. That one goes great too. So far things are looking good, and I'm able to rationalize the age difference, because I've always been told I'm so mature that it just makes sense. My friends know he's older, but not how much, so I just lie and say he's only just in college and it's fine by them, I guess. FG and I set up our next date, and it works out that it's during a break in school for him, so we agree to do it on long weekend, so I can stay overnight. The weekend comes, and I have a friend I trust drive me to his apartment, and she is staying with family nearby just in case. Smart move. At first things are fine. We cook and talk, and watch something dumb on TV. We eventually start fooling around, and he's taking it further and further, but it feels good, so I'm going with it. Then he starts talking. Initially I'm like, oh, this must be dirty talk. Let me listen and learn. But as I listen I realize how weird it is. Then it goes from weird to inappropriate. He's saying things like, I love how you still wear your hair in these little pigtail braids, or I remember when I first met you how you'd bite your bottom lip when you were working, and all I could think was how much I wanted to bite it. That was super sketch, considering I was 9 when we met. But then, after unhooking my bra, he said, man, I remember before you had these. I wish we could have done this then. That's when I was like, girl, has SVU taught you nothing? I excused myself to the restroom and texted my friend 911. I head back out and try to slow things down, but he's getting pretty insistent. Just when I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to do more than I want to with this creeper, there's a loud banging on the door and we jump apart. He gets the door and it's my friend and her grown-ass cousin coming to get me. He shouts at me to get my sheet and get in the car while he talks to this guy. I comply and my friend and I are in the car listening to her cousin shout, "You're faking 24, she's barely 15, do the math," and my boyfriend talking about how 15 is old enough and I've known her since she was little, and the cousin is like, "Bruh, that doesn't help your case, leave her the fuck alone." That was not my finest moment, but once I caught on to the crazy, I noped the fuck out of there. Craziest 10 weeks of my young life. I went to hang out with my ex who lived about 50 minutes away. After being there for about an hour he got a text and said he had to leave to pay someone back some money he owed. I asked how long it would be and if I could just wait for him at his place, which he said he didn't know, and sent me away. I was obviously annoyed, but went home. After another hour I get a call from him saying I should come back. I told him no. He said he had something really important to tell me and that I should come back. I said he should just tell me over the phone. He said he couldn't do that and that it was too important and needed to be said in person. After a little while smelling some BS, I did decide to drive back to hear what he had to say. So I get there and asked him what he wanted to tell me. He said it wasn't important anymore and proceeded to act like normal. I felt manipulated by the whole thing, made to drive 4 hours altogether that day. Before I left I had already decided I was going to break up with him, but wanted an answer before I left. Were you actually going to tell me something, or did you just say that to make me drive out here? He at first says it was to make me drive out there, but then says he was going to ask if we could have an open relationship. Not that I have anyone in mind, but if I did, it would be this close friend of mine. Yeah, that's a big nope from me. I officially broke it off with him and left. He then stalked me over social media and through text sporadically for the next 2 years. I never responded and would just block him, but he made several new accounts to keep reaching out to me saying weird stuff like, "It's so crazy how the world works and how our paths seem like they are meant to be." He finally stopped after those 2 years though. We were only in a relationship for a month and a half. After a year together, hanging out with her and her kids at her parents' house, having fun, brother calls, they had never met him yet. Asks if he can come get my keys, needs in my place. Sure bro. As a side note, I'm pretty damn white. Blonde hair. Blue eyes. Dad is Germanic Russian. Mother Polish. There is hella all kinda colors in my family, but they had met only me and my parents. Brother comes over, knocks on door. Girlfriend's dad opens the door and proceeds to just go the hell off on my brother with an amazing variety of racist slurs. Mind, these are small as people, yo. Girlfriend was healthy, met her 4 months pregnant. At 9 months she maybe topped 120 lbs. Her dad is a little guy too. And there's my brother, all 6 foot, 220 pounds of muscle, half black, half Puerto Rican, just staring at this angry little white man. Bro started laughing. I just stood up, said I'm out here and left. She was an amazing woman and loved her daughters so much that ended going to court for custody of them and made sure I got a decidedly not white judge and won without a hitch. She called me later that night, asked me why I never said my brother wasn't white. I said as far as I was aware it hadn't mattered. She said it did. Told her I loved her. Then told her that she was welcome to work on her viewpoint. I would gladly take her back. And hung up. Yes. In literally a year, the white supremacist, racist thing actually was never noticed. We were never in a situation where it would be, which should say something, in a large city based around agriculture. I take great pride in the fact my eldest married a kid from Mexico City who immigrated at 16 and promptly met her. Dated for 4 years, married for 9 now, and the youngest daughter had a lovely girlfriend from Iran, who immigrated at 15, who is now a stunningly handsome man, happily married to his wife, my daughter, for 4 years now. Tickles me freaking pink to know how best their mother's family is, woot woo. Wanted to date me, but not officially and in secret. Not because I'm ashamed of you, but because I don't know if I want people knowing I'm into you. I went with it, since I was head over heels for her. After months of being love bombed and then destroyed emotionally, I found out that she was talking shit behind my back to literally everyone she knew, saying I was a stalker and caused so much drama in her life, and how she was just putting up with me because I'm a little bit slow in the head. I talked to her about it and got stuff chucked at me, cornered and threatened, the whole package. I stuck around because I knew she would fulfill the threats she made. She had proven that previously. Another month later, found out she was cheating on me for half the time we had been dating. And to top it off, she had tried to make me and this guy besties over the summer by hanging out with us together and suggesting we get to know each other. He was a cool guy and I don't think he ever found out that he'd been played. At that point I tried to talk to her about how we could amicably separate, because while I cared about her, I was really hurt by all the stuff she had done. I got huge paragraphs about how we were never actually a thing, and I was a placeholder she could kick around like a small animal. There was a bunch more, but anyway, I jumped ship after that and just tried to minimize the damage she had caused with the people in my life. She had told most people we knew that I abused her and she was too scared to leave. When I broke up with her, she posted on social media a bunch of end domestic violence posts and linked abuse survivor stories to her profile with messages like "we are in this together." I had wanted to be friends with a guy she knew even before we had been dating. She said that he kind of hated me and thought I was weird and gross. At the time I believed her wholeheartedly, not to mention he avoided me like the plague. It turns out she told him that I was stalking her and tried to rape her and whatnot, so understandably he wasn't a fan. About a year after me and this girl parted ways, I wondered why the guy hated me so much, so I started talking to him once in a while. We hit it off, and a few months after, we started dating. It turns out that the reason my ex had told him all that horrible stuff about me was he thought I looked friendly, but she liked him, so she did her best to polarize us. After I left, she ruined his 3-year relationship with his girlfriend. Manipulation, of course. He realized how toxic she was and left. And then we connected later that year. Me and that guy are still together and have been for years. So I suppose it worked out in the end and gave my partner and I mutual trauma to bond over. Anyway, yeah, so that happened. Short version, was in a traumatizing car accident, and when she got home, all she did was complain about how annoying one of her coworkers was. Long version, okay, it's super long. Warning, blood and actual gore could be triggering. A few years ago, I was driving on the freeway on my way to work. Traffic came to a stop due to a fender bender, and I had to hit my brakes fairly hard to stop in time, but not unreasonably hard. The backpack I had on the passenger seat tipped over, but didn't fall off the seat. The big delivery truck behind me changed into the next lane to have a little more stopping distance, and the guy on the motorcycle behind him saw that the truck was changing lanes, but didn't see that traffic was stopped. So he sped up to fill the gap, only to find my car and all the cars in front of me at a complete stop in front of him. He swerved to miss me, but ended up slamming into the back of my car, pinning his leg between his bike and my bumper, then was thrown off his bike and went careening off toward the side of the road. I got out of the car and immediately saw that his leg had been snapped in half at the thigh and was literally folded over underneath him with mangled flesh scattered around him and blood pooling underneath him. He was clearly in shock. When a bystander, one of the people from the original fender bender, asked if he could feel his leg, his response was, "Why, does it look like it's broken or something?" After making sure someone called an ambulance, I sat with him and talked to him until they arrived, then reported what had happened to the police, etc., and finally limped my still mostly drivable car back home, even though half the bumper was hanging off. When I got home, I called my boss to tell him I wouldn't be in for work that day, and then literally had to wash blood and chunks of human flesh off of what was left of my bumper. As I was doing so, an animal control truck pulled up, and the guy asked if I lived there, then pulled my dog out of his truck and asked if it was my dog. It was the dog I had told my wife we shouldn't get because life was already crazy enough, but she got it anyway. It turns out that she had let the dog out to pee that morning, but hadn't bothered to let her back in, so the dog had been roving the neighborhood and somebody had called about her. It also turned out that my wife hadn't bothered to immunize or register her, so there was no record of her in the county database, and the guy had been about to take her to the pound. Anyway, this whole conversation was happening while I was washing human flesh off of my bumper, so I assured the guy that we would get the dog registered and tried to end the conversation as quickly as I could. Then I called my wife to tell her about the accident and how shaken up I was. Her only response was, "Oh man, that sucks." Then when I told her about the animal control incident, she was like, "Oh, since you're taking the day off anyway, if you could take care of the dog's registration and stuff, that'd be great." Like, yes, I was so traumatized I didn't feel like I could go into work, but sure, ask me to take care of the registration for the dog that I told you we shouldn't get. Needless to say, I did not take care of the dog's registration. I took a shower, put on some fresh clothes, then sat staring at the wall and shaking, wondering if the guy was going to make it, and replaying the accident over and over, trying to think if there was anything I could have done differently. There wasn't. When my wife got home, she burst in the door and immediately began complaining about how one of her coworkers was acting like a beach, which, it later turned out, was intentional because the coworker suspected my wife was having an affair with another one of their coworkers, which it later turned out she was. She didn't utter a single word about the car accident, didn't ask how I was, and when I finally told her that I was still really shaken up about it, she just kind of brushed it off and asked if I had happened to put in a load of laundry, since I had been home anyway. I was messed up enough about the accident that I didn't want to go back into work in person, but was lucky enough that I was able to work from home for a few days. Over the course of the next week she, 1. complained that I was working from home, but that I wasn't using the extra time to cook dinner before she got home. 2. complained that I was working in the house and not outside, since it was so beautiful outside. 3. complained that I didn't take the dog for a walk in the middle of my workday. 4. told me that it was fun driving together when I eventually went back to work and she gave me a ride because my car was in the shop. 5. told me the next day that it was too stressful and she couldn't handle riding to work together anymore. 6. told me that I'd have to figure out how to get to the rental car place on my own once the other guy's insurance finally agreed to pay for it because she had already had enough of my accident. And 7. complained that I was a pushover for not making them give me a luxury SUV to replace my compact car because the accident was the other guy's fault and he should have to pay for it. I wish I could say that all of that made me straight up nope out of the relationship. It took a lot more time and me finding out about 2 affairs before things finally ended. But the day of the accident and the following week were the first time I realized that she just literally didn't care about me at all and that I deserved something better. Was together with this guy for 2 months. He was a gamer and didn't really wanted to go OZT a lot and told me he wasn't jealous. After nearly 8 weeks of being together with him, I wanted to go on a 4-day holiday trip. He agreed. It was 33 degrees and really nice weather to go swimming. He also liked swimming, and we did it a couple times. The water was too cold for him, and then he exploded and said, "You are always forcing me to do stuff." I was like, what? I just wanted to have a nice time with you." He got angry and said, "Yeah, and that one time you went drinking alone with your friends probably looking at your friend Paul." Me, first, Paul is together with my friend. Second, I asked you if you wanted to come, and you said no. Does that mean I'm also not allowed to go? He, I thought you could game with me. Me, you never said that. He, I want to go home now. Me, what? We only have been here for 2 days. He packed his stuff and I went with him because I thought it was also my fault. We drove 4H home. It was the evening of the national day in my country and I actually wanted to celebrate it in the holidays. Me realizing this will not stop and I will always feel bad having a nice time alone or with my friends. 3 days later I was like, I just can't do this anymore. It's more of a friendship, but we dated for like 2 weeks and he broke up with me. Warning, longer story, he was horribly misogynistic, saying that women had to be perfect and soft and beautiful, that no man could ever love a woman who works out. I was about 15 to 16, and he was 17ish when he would tell me those things. I'm overweight and I used to be into powerlifting, and it hurt a lot when he told me that men didn't like me, and I wondered if my boyfriend would hate me. Plot twist, boyfriend doesn't mind being carried bridal style and enjoys my big stomach and thighs. He was also incredibly racist. He got jumped once while with a black friend, mind you, by 2 or 3 guys that he said smelled black, and immediately after told me that he faking hates nigger. I don't know why I didn't drop him after that, but I started to distance myself. He would guilt me into giving him physical affection and preyed on my naivety when it came to real world issues. Oh, my mother hasn't massaged me in years despite my leg being crippled. I miss being hugged. I'm all alone and everyone hates me. That sort of thing. Again, being like 16, I thought I had to do something because no one else would. I would bring him lunches every day because he would complain about not eating, then proceed to break my containers and give away my food because it's his personality to share, and I should know that he always gives this to others. He would tell me constantly to break up with my boyfriend or take a break. I listened a couple times and we both went on breaks. It sucked as whole dude guilted me into kissing him once and I felt sick to my stomach. He had been talking about how he was so alone and no one would kiss him, but I couldn't, all this horrible bullcrap, and of course, me being a sheltered 16-year-old, kissed him. I told my boyfriend immediately afterward, and I don't know why, but he forgave me, likely because me and him had only been together about 3 to 4 months at the time. My sweetheart's a saint. He was hardcore into lolicon and thought kids could have sex once they got their periods. I got my first period at 8 years old due to childhood obesity. He knew this. He also knew that I had been sexually assaulted in class my freshman year. The pre-breaking point was when I was 17. He called me out of nowhere telling me that he would either call me or a hotline, and he chose me with the sound of a busy road behind him. I shut him out for a few days after that, and I started to feel happier, but I told him that I would give him another chance, mainly because he wouldn't shut up about how lonely he was if he never did that again. He told me I should have known that he wouldn't have done anything, and it was my fault. I was anxious over nothing. I sucked it up and kept going. About 3 days afterward it came out that he was trying to hook up with a drug-addicted freshman girl with family issues. He was nearly 19, and she had just turned 15. I didn't even like the girl, had a health class with her senior year, but I wouldn't wish what I had gone through on her. I haven't spoken to him since. I tried to look past so many things he did, racism, sexism, general horribleness, and justified it to myself as we are living in the South. Maybe that's just his parents influencing him, but I truly and honestly could not excuse him taking advantage of a minor the way he tried to do. I was a horrible person when I was around him, and I'm so happy he's out of my life now. I hope he reads this and feels awful. Nasty cunt. So one story is guy who I lived with at uni who was super nice and from my city came to visit my apartment. He wanted a booty call, but during the visit I received a phone call from my ex who was crying, and I was completely out of the mood. It happens, but not anymore. Yay. The guy who was visiting had a joint with me, and then after telling him I wasn't in the mood and I'm cool if we just hang out, he told me it was fine and so on. Around 5/10 minutes later he tried to bet me that if he beat me at Call of Duty, that I would sleep with him. I laughed it off and said he wouldn't beat me and I'm not betting, and he didn't win at all. He asked me after this about 5-6 times until I turned around and said, "What's the matter with you? Can't you take no for an answer?" He then promptly said that he thought he should leave. I agreed and walked him to the door and gave him directions to leave the building. Oh, but it didn't end there. He sat outside in his van for the next 3/4 hours texting me asking me to change my mind and that he was waiting. Safe to say, my mind did not change, and after that, I didn't invite him over ever again. Another story is about a friend with benefits who I worked with. We were literally just that. I couldn't get into a relationship with him simply because after sex/whenever he sweated it smelled like the worst thing on earth. I couldn't ever imagine waking up to that all the time. He also ended up being a very manipulative liar who lied to my face on a couple of occasions. When I found out, I called him out on his bullshit, blocked him and ignored his calls. Fortunately, I'd secured a new job/promotion and wasn't in the same office anymore. I saw him on a work night out and he got drunk and asked if I was going to ignore him, and I said that he lied to my face, which shows no respect, so yes, I was going to ignore him. We wished each other all the best in life and that was that. He was 18, I was 25. First mistake lol. I was seeing multiple guys from Tinder and was upfront about that. I'm also poly and told him that. He said he just wanted to hook up. Cool. First date, we do. One of the other guys I was seeing had quickly become a good friend. Informed him of this as well. Didn't have to, I'm just an open person. Second date rolls around. He's hung up on this new friend. Keeps interrogating me about him. I have to keep telling him we are hooking up, not in a relationship, and this guy's my pal. So it doesn't concern him. Third date. I thought it was just us. Nope. Family dinner with his dad, his girlfriend, his sister, and her boyfriend. Surprise. I play it cool, but I'm a bit miffed. Turns out he's told everyone I'm his girlfriend. At this point I'm just here for food, drinks, and a fact, then I'll be ghosting him. In a MCDS run, I talked to him about the fact that telling everyone I'm his girlfriend when I'm not is not okay. We get back, his dad is heading to bed with his girlfriend, but first takes the four of us aside and informs us we are not allowed to have sex under his roof while his girlfriend is over because they're gonna fuck, so we are not allowed. I deck. I ask the guy for another rum and coke, which we had been drinking all night. Guess that was the tipping point for him. He starts absolutely faking balling that I'm friends with a guy, that I'm poly, that I don't want to be his girlfriend, and that oh, by the way, he's a furry and I'm discriminating against him. I calm him down. I'm about to leave and we are talking. He initiates making out and he's sobered up a bit at this point, thank God. So I think fuck it and go with it. You can already hear his sister and dad and their respective partners going at it. Weird, but fuck it had become my mantra at this point. I leave shortly after. The next day, he texts and wants me to come over, and I tell him I'm out shopping with my new friend. He faking loses it. Walls of texts. How can I betray him? I'm just doing this because he's a furry. I'm a slut. Oh, by the way, my dad's mad at you for having sex here when he told you not to. So I disrespected his dad and I'm not allowed back till I apologize. Also, how dare I come into his house and vandalize their belongings. I peeled a label off an empty bottle and threw it out and drink all their liquor. I had one extra drink mayo. I told him to grow the fuck up because no one wants a spoiled man Bobby as a partner. Blocked him and now I don't date any guys that are over 2 years younger than me lol. Probably should ditched him sooner, but I learned my lesson lmayo. Told my ex I don't put up with people that do hardcore drugs. Sounds judgmental, but it's solely because I watch my siblings do drugs and be abusive. I decided at a young age I wasn't going to be around that shit. Anyways, he said he only smoked weed, and I occasionally did too, so I didn't think twice about it. 7 or so months into our relationship he went to visit his parents in another state. He said service was spotty where they lived, so I didn't expect to hear from him much. But I had this horrible gut feeling the whole time he was gone. He visited them once or twice a month after that, and each time I had that horrible feeling. Before we hit a year together I broke it off. We both said some shitty things in a heated argument and I just couldn't take it anymore. Sure as shit, found out from a stranger who messaged me on FB that he was doing cocaine when he saw family and sleeping with his ex who got pregnant few months before we broke up. The stranger was looking for him as he was his dealer and wanted his money. I immediately contacted the police and handed the info over, then blocked the guy. Best decision I made, and now I follow my gut feeling more. Oh, to top it off, after we broke up he surprised visited my place a couple of times. Never got out of his truck, just parked at the bottom of my driveway, idling. My then best friend, now husband, was with me one of the times. My ex had a truck that I could recognize the sound of and told my friend he was here. X flipped out and called me a town hoe when he saw my friend. I laughed and called the cops again. There was also the time I hooked up with a guy out of sheer boredom and depression. He and I became friends because we had some mutual interests and he suggested we become friends with benefits. Yes, I know. I already knew it wasn't a good idea to get strings because I was so vulnerable at the time, but I guess I'm a glutton for punishment. Our friendship felt genuine at times. He seemed to care when appropriate and showed interest in getting to know me and asking about my life. I was semi-guarded with him, but I felt comfortable enough to hang out. Our hangouts were often strange in that he liked to take walks around to check out girls. This behavior, even prior to our hooking up, was very uncomfortable for me. But then he was also downright predatory, he would say, and do things I found disturbing, specifically towards women. One of his quips was 50 no's, and a maybe is still a yes. Since we were both tradespeople, I naively believed this was just part of the industry, and it kind of was, for me, but that's another story. When we finally agreed to be FWB, we had both put down some ground rules. He said he didn't want me getting attached, which he wound up doing himself, and that he wasn't interested in dating. I said I wasn't interested in seeing him anymore if he wanted to sleep with someone else. We both agreed and commenced. First, he pressured me to have anesthesia, which I really did not want to do. I have dealt with trauma in my past, and I made this very clear to him. But did that matter to good old friend? No, of course not. What daddy wants, daddy gets. Then, he started pressuring me to see him every day, sometimes twice a day. This also accompanied spending a lot more friend time together, so here I stupidly believed we were the best of buds. Fuck, I was stupid. He would have me over under the guise of playing video games or watching a movie, but all he would do is try to have sex with me. We literally never did anything else alone together. Then, there was a girl he was interested in. No problem, we aren't dating. Enjoy yourself, I said. He would hang out with her and detail to me, disgustingly, how she was, and I practically knew everything about her because he never stopped talking about her. And before you say, you're jealous, no, I really wasn't. I just really didn't need to know what this girl's body parts smelled like. He was becoming unbearable to spend time around, but luckily he took care of that himself. Abruptly, he decided to stop talking to me altogether. He didn't call or text, didn't ask to hang out, and in fact, he took it further, going as far as to act like I didn't exist at all when we were in the same room together. While I wasn't necessarily interested in 99% of our talks being about this girl he was obsessed with, it doesn't mean I didn't want to still be friends. After all, they call it friends with benefits because there's usually friendship. Apparently he didn't feel the same. Once I understood my place in his life, I left him alone. I spent a lot of time during this period catching up on things and just living my best life. But admittedly I was very lonely. One day, I was having a coffee alone when he showed up, decidedly my friend again, asking why I never hang out anymore. He completely lied about ignoring me, tried convincing me that it had been me who had stopped talking to him, none of which was true. But I was no longer feeling particularly partial to him, and I was feeling a lot less attracted than I had just a month before. He insisted on making it up to me. He wanted to hang out, so I agreed. Big mistake because he just wanted sex, and decided after that to fall asleep. I wandered into his kitchen for some water, and as I walked around, I began to really look at his place. I wasn't digging through drawers or anything, but I was observing details I had ignored when I had been so infatuated with him. Some major things I noticed on that day was that he seemed to never have a sheet on his bed, his kitchen was filthy, and his entire house smelled strongly of dog feces and urine. I was really grossed out all of a sudden and decided to leave. On my way home, I thought honestly about how I really felt towards him, and some things that jumped out at me were how uncomfortable I often felt around him, how irritated I was by his misogynistic view of women, how bothered I was about the way he objectified me, and even the girl he was obsessed with, and ultimately I couldn't come up with one thing I even really liked about him. I reframed the idea of him in my mind, and I have never been back to his house since. He has tried multiple times to get in touch with me, going as far as adding me on numerous messaging apps and even coming to my house. He has harassed me about being friends, even though we have literally never been friends. I see that now, and even once put his hands on me years after our last encounter. The most recent time, I threatened to call the cops and have him arrested for stalking, as I have made it infinitely clear I'm not interested in being friends or hanging out. Perhaps not a story of noping out of a relationship, but more of being disenchanted. So unfortunately I never noped out of the relationship, but in hindsight there were tons of red flags that I just ignored. We got together the summer I was waiting for a disciplinary hearing to see if I would be expelled from college for academic reasons. Nothing fun/exciting. When I was expelled and went into a pretty deep depression that I didn't even recognize for years, she said she was happy because a long distance relationship would have been hard. She practically prohibited me from having any female friends. She tried to turn me against my family. She sabotaged every attempt I made to go back to school. When my parents moved out of state, and my sister and I got an apartment together to stay local, she just kinda moved in. Never asked, she just did. Borderline accused me of cheating at least a few times a year. The end of the relationship was a process that latest a few months. She went on a trip to England with her platonic male friend, and I really didn't care. Then I decided to move to upstate New York, where my parents had moved to take advantage of SUNY's Empire State College program, remote state college, that took up to 3 years of transfer credit, intended specifically to allow working adults finish their degrees. She moved back in with her parents in NJ. At some point she found out that I was still smoking, and she lost her mind, said that if I lied about that I must have lied about cheating, and we were done. This is after she cancelled plans for us to see each other in person 3 times. Once when I had left my sister's college graduation in Philly early to see her, and instead had to drive all the way back to upstate New York. Within weeks she had moved to North Carolina with her platonic friend, and despite her swearing that she had never cheated on me, I happened to see her FB post later that year celebrating their first anniversary, months before the first anniversary of our breakup. But the story has a happy ending. A couple months after that relationship ended, I started dating a woman at work. She is now my wife. Our son is almost 1. We just bought a house, and over the years we've been together I not only finished my degree, but went to law school, thanks mostly to her love and support, and pushing me to follow my dreams. Looking back years later, I realized that I was deeply depressed after getting booted from school, and our relationship just put me in emotional stasis, unable to move on or grow. We were together for something like 4 years, and for the second half of our relationship I didn't really love her. I just didn't care enough to do anything. Dude, she just had a ton of baggage. Mind you, we all have baggage, but she refused to work on hers, and would project all her past relationship issues onto me. She would love talking about her exes, but got super jealous and emotional if I talked about mine. She also had this super weird thing where she would shut down and answer questions with one word if I brought her to social outings with my friends. My friends are family, and this bothered me to no end. She would get really upset for not reading her mind when she wanted to leave or exit a place, an outing, or whatever, but get this, she wouldn't communicate any of it to me beforehand. No change in tone or body language, no subtle text message, no hand on the arm and look, no whisper in the ear, just, why couldn't you tell I wanted to leave? Once we got to the car, like, I was done talking, but she was chatting away super animated. She also had this terrible thing about having really awful anxiety when in cars because of an accident when she was younger, but she would start fights in the car all the time, which increased her stress and mine. She also got really upset that I was able to stay calm when there was an argument. She would scream and shout, and then had the gall to tell me I was unhealthy and sucked at communicating because I didn't scream and shout. Literally 90% of my time with her I was stressed because I anticipated a fight or confrontation. We only dated 2 months, and when I told her I wanted to break up, she begged me not to leave, weeping and professing her love for me. Yeah, bye. She also dated my little brother over 10 years ago, casually, and he cheated on her. It was a high school romance for like a month, but I got the feeling that she still wasn't over him. Never doing that again. I should have left after week 1, but she was fine. Also, TMI, I would go down on her constantly, but she would never return the favor. I don't do it, for the single hope of receiving it in turn, but she flat out would not. Oh, and some guy I was cool with said this weird creepy thing over Snapchat. Where do I get one of those? When I sent him and some friends a selfie of the two of us on a walk before breaking up. They're dating now. I'm a psych major now, and golly, every page is like you get a red flag, you get a red flag, you get a yeah. Never doing that again. 1. The first date. The plan was to meet at my uni then go to the city together for dinner. But then the time was late, so I suggested to just meet in the city. He kept insisting he wanted to come to uni first. I was like, what is his deal? In the end we met in the city. I told him I was hungry, so let's just get dinner. We sat down, and he mentioned well, if I waited, we could hang out in uni first. I was like by the time we get to the city, it'll already be too late in the day to have dinner. I didn't understand what was his deal. Then weeks after, we went to a concert. He was late. I was standing in line alone. He then came and told me he wanted to get dinner first. He said BCS it won't start until late anyway. I was a bit sad. BCS I wanted to get in front. I love the rapper and him short, so I want a good place. But then I left the line to get dinner with him at a nearby restaurant. He ate some chicken wings and mentioned something about my shirt, which I think is a bit rude. Then we walked to the concert venue. Halfway I noticed he was wearing a ring. So I asked why is he wearing a ring? He said his grandma gave it to him and he took it off. I was like. Everyone was already in the venue. We got in. He bought us drinks. He said he wanted to go to the toilet. I was like alright. He then disappeared. At this point I'm like fuck him. I just wanna enjoy the concert. He then came back with another girl, introduced me to her, and said he just met her. The girl is the same race as me. He obviously has a type. I think he wants a threesome or something. I think that was his motive. No faking way. Saw his phone, and he had a lot of girls list. All the same race with me. So that was his type. I then ditched him at the concert, and went a bit in front, cause I can't see. He kept calling me, and I told him I'm staying where I am. I mean that was the second date. I don't have feelings for him. So I'm okay with ditching him. It does hurt though, that he did that to me. I tried to calm down. BCS I really like the rapper and I don't want my memories of seeing the rapper live be tainted by the stupid memory of the guy. Then he left early before the concert ends. Thank God. Then after the concert ends, I saw the girl again. The girl he introduced me to. I was surprised. BCS I thought she went home with him. I stopped her and told her to be careful with the guy. She asked if I was his girlfriend. I was like nope. She then thanked me for telling her, and she will be careful. That guy is freaking weird, man. The next day he had the audacity to hit me up back quote hey, but I never replied. I love to read and have some quiet time. My boyfriend was the opposite. He wanted to be interacting non-stop. If we weren't talking, he was on the phone. He wanted me to come along on every errand he ran, and wanted to tag along with me for every errand I ran. I longed for a bit of time to myself. One Saturday, I realized that I couldn't remember the last time I had read a book. I told boyfriend I was going to read for the afternoon. He was going to replant plants on our balcony into larger pots. Great, I thought. A solo activity for him. Ha. He couldn't stop himself from talking to me and asking for assistance. Could I bring him this? Could I move that? Could I help him do blah blah? And when he wasn't asking for help he was talking to me from the balcony. I kept saying that I was trying to read. He would say, yeah right sorry. Then interrupt me again a few minimums later. Finally I said, I told you that I want to read, but you keep interrupting me. I don't remember the last time I read a book. Please let me read. But I have dirt all over me, and I didn't want to run back and forth making a mess. Gather what you need. And please stop talking to me. I'm doing something nice for us to enjoy, and you don't even want to keep me company while I'm doing it, or help out at all. I'm doing it. I just asked for a little help from you. I appreciate what you're doing, but I said I'm trying to read. How would you manage to repot plants if I were not here? Pretend I'm not here. Well, that did it. He was all hurt and wounded and wanted to talk about our relationship. Oh boy. He came in, got cleaned up, and sat right in front of me, sitting on the trunk we used for a coffee table. He closed my book, took my hands, and said very earnestly, "We need to talk. I need more intimacy. I don't mean sex, I mean connection." My brain exploded into thoughts like, what? Are you faking kidding me right now? You want more intimacy? More connection? Holy crap, we are so wrong for each other. We are totally mismatched. Geez, I can't even read without hurting his feelings. I hopped up and said, "No. We have too much connection. We're interacting so much all the time that I can't read a damned book. Get out of my face. Shut up for 5 seconds while I tell you I'm out. You will be a great partner for someone else who doesn't need to ever be alone with their thoughts or do any solo activities. I'm going to my parents' house to read this book and will come back tomorrow with friends and a U-Haul to get my stuff. You can have the apartment, bye." And I left, rented a storage place and a U-Haul, and asked him to give me the next afternoon to move out. He was there, of course, talking to me the entire time I packed up. I stayed at my parents for a couple of weeks, rented another apt, and never looked back. TLDR, I moved out when needy chatty boyfriend would not shut up long enough to let me read one page in a book. My girlfriend and my mother hated each other. Girlfriend and I had been dating for several years since college. I was living with my mother because mom was mentally ill and needed me around. My girlfriend resented that I had not told my girlfriend the extent of my mom's mental illness. One day, I came home from work and found that my mother had committed suicide. I did not want to stay in the house, so I moved in with my girlfriend until I could find a place. My girlfriend immediately started complaining that I was distant. I guess so, after finding my mom dead. 2 weeks later, I was at my mother's place cleaning it up, and my best friend since grade school dropped by. We stayed late talking, and I missed dinner with my girlfriend. I got my buddy to drive me back to her place, and when I went upstairs, the whole apartment was dark, and she did not answer when I called her name. I went into the bathroom and turned on the light. The wall around the switch was streaked with blood. Looked like something the Manson family had done. I whipped around, and my girlfriend was sitting on the floor by the tub with blood all over her shirt and jeans. Of course, I thought she had tried to kill herself, and I grabbed her hands to examine her wrists. There was only a big deep gash on the ball of her thumb. She claimed she had been drinking wine in the dark in the bathroom and broke her glass and accidentally cut herself. She was obviously squeezing her thumb to make the blood flow. She claimed to be drunk, but she didn't even have an alcohol smell on her breath, and she sobered up very quickly when I wanted to take her to the ER for stitches. She had elaborately staged the whole thing to get my attention, I guess. I realized right then that if she was capable of that, she would be capable of anything. I stayed in the relationship for another month or so, but at that moment I knew it was only a matter of time before I had to get out. We were at one of my best friend's weddings. I was going to drive myself home later, so didn't plan on drinking much. She offered to drive. I get plastered. At some point in the night I learned she was planning to ditch me there to go cheat on me. I confronted her. She starts walking off, and I'm naturally shouting and pissed. When she is about 10 feet from me, she throws herself into a car and starts screaming that I hit her. I'm standing there absolutely dumbfounded. A guy approaches me and starts shoving me, telling me to leave her alone. I didn't take kindly to it and said 2 to 3 times, the next time he touches me, I'm going to hit him. I hit him really hard. He's knocked out, falls, hits his face, and gets a little bloody. Someone calls the cops and half the people are trying to get me out of there. I refuse to leave because I didn't start shit. Cops show up, and some random strangers told him, accurately, that I only hit him when provoked. The other guy refuses to press charges. He faking knew better. So I'm off, free to go. Wrong. Cop feels like I wasted his time, so unless I got a ride home I'm going to jail. I walk into the reception with the cop, looking for a ride. I see a group of friends while the cop is explaining to the groom's mom what happened. I get punched I look up. It's one of my good friends. Remember the guy I punched outside? That's his girlfriend's dad, who is also apparently got some kind of back disability. So now I'm the asshole and he's going to kick my ass for it. After a little scuffle I walk back to the cop and say, man, just take me to jail. He handcuffs me and we start walking outside when the groom's mom stops us and says, fuck that, I'm taking him home. She puts me in the car, drives my drunken ass home, telling me how bad she can't stand the guy I punched. She grew up with him and not to worry about anything. She gives me a cigarette and heads back to the reception. Thanks Connie. I pass out in my recliner. Sleep. Nope. Phone is blowing up, girlfriend's mom calling telling me I need to stay away from her daughter. That's fine girlfriend's mom. I don't want anything to do with that slut anyways. Click. Now ex-girlfriend and her new lover call. Did you call me a slut to my mom? Yep, new lover. I think you know who I am. I know where you live. I'm gonna come beat your ass. If you honestly think right now, if you came here and have anything to lose, if you did beat my ass, you're in for a surprise. Bring it on over, motherfaker. I think that calmness and general lack of anger in my voice scared him a little bit. They never did come. I walked to a buddy's house the next morning to catch a ride to my truck. When we get there I have 4 flats and it's been keyed down both sides. I hop back in buddy's truck to head home. Can't do anything with my POS ATM. I look at him and just say, what a night. Former friend relationship. Here I had a friend who smokes pot all time along with his other friends. I on the other hand are one of the few friends he has that doesn't do any types of drugs, and he respected that, which made me feel comfortable around him while he was smoking. One day I went to a college party, location, frat house, and him and his friends were all in the basement of the house just smoking and vibing. As I said hello to my friend, he looked at me and thought that it was a good time, that I can smoke weed for the first time. I told him I'm not interested in smoking anything, yet he kept on pushing me for like 5 minutes. I break. Okay, I'll smoke one blunt. Worst decision of my life. I remember smoking with him and his friends and we're all having a great time. Until I started to feel like I was coming out of my own body, and yet I was still in real time. I fell to the ground and I couldn't move. Turns out the blunt my friend gave me was laced with KK hole. I faintly remember all of them laughing and calling me mean names. I didn't do anything to them. They're all just assholes. My friend and his other friend carried me out to a bathroom in the basement of the house, threw me into the bathtub with my face facing the ceiling. They turned on the cold shower and the shower head was pointed directly to my face, so the cold water was hitting my face all at once. Mind you, I still couldn't move. I was left there for hours. I couldn't move, barely breath because of the shower head only hitting my face. I was tripping, like seeing shapes move and cheat. This was equivalent to being buried alive. They did this to me because they thought it was funny to them. Anyway, hours passed by, and I was able to move again. I moved slowly out of my position and crawled up the basement stairs. The party was over. Cups everywhere, bottles everywhere. I even saw one guy passed out on the ground. I pulled out my phone to call one of my buddies to pick me up, but the water from the shower destroyed my phone. I was left with nothing, and I had class the next day. Luckily, I was able to stand on my 2 feet after pushing myself 4 minutes. I Ubered myself home, and thank God that I was alive. I ghosted my friend that drugged me ever since. I heard he got in trouble with the authorities about 4 months ago. I'm not sure what he got in trouble for, but I don't give a fuck. Ever since then I never smoked pot ever again. This was 2 years ago. Sophomore year in college. I missed a lot of red flags and flashing sirens that told me to break up with my ex, but what finally had me break up with her was this massive attempt at gaslighting me. I had finally been able to convince her to see a therapist. She most likely had undiagnosed BPD that was running rampant, as well as a lot of past trauma from her childhood and high school years that came out in verbal, emotional, and sometimes physical abuse against me, and I couldn't hold it together anymore, and we decided to take a break while she sorted some things out. She emailed me a few weeks after and told me that her therapist thinks I'm verbally abusive and that is what is causing our problems, and that the therapist thinks we should do couples counseling. I don't know if it was the fact that I had been away from her for a few weeks at that point and her hold on me had weakened, and I finally recognized the gaslighting for what it was, or the fact that my dad had once told me to run if someone you're dating asks for couples counseling and you aren't married or have a kid with them, but I broke it off then and there with her. Looking back, I realized she had probably cheated on me a few times, randomly talking to guys she met online, downloading Tinder just to see what it's about, constantly accusing me of cheating, even though I either worked or hung out with her, etc., and had tried gaslighting me a ton as well as other, much more abusive things. I genuinely hope she got the help she needed, because last I saw she's married now, and I hope that guy isn't going through what I went through. We were on a nice walk around town about a day after we made it official. Suddenly, he bolted down the sidewalk thrashing his arms and screaming. I laughed nervously because I had no idea what was going on and just waited for him to come back. When he finally calmed down, I asked him what happened and he said, there was a bee buzzing in my ear. When I asked him if he was allergic to bees and that's why he was so scared, he said, well, no. I was so confused why somebody would react like that, unless their life was in danger. He kept doing weird shit-like muttering to himself behind the closed door when he would use the bathroom, snooping around my parents' house without permission and opening the door to the basement apartment, which was occupied at the time, being horrifically awkward on social media, and absolutely exploding with temper tantrums at work. We dated for 3 weeks. 2.5 of those was me trying to figure out how to break it off. It was after he tried to initiate sex with me for like the 6th time. I refused every time for religious reasons, and he had zero respect for my boundaries. He managed to get me out of my shirt that night, and I started crying because I was not into it. I felt so violated. After I did break it off and blocked him on social media, he found my email after I moved away and started dating a different guy about 6 months later. He sent me an absolute brick of text that said nothing but fuck you, 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 and made my scrolling finger sore. He was an embarrassment of a human being. Do I have a doozy? So I went on a date with a guy. He was cute and sweet and nice. We had a ton in common, and it was honestly one of the best first dates I'd been on up till then. It also ended with an amazing kiss. So he was from a town not too far away from where I was living, maybe an hour away by train. So we both went home, and we are talking and making plans for me to visit him the following week. In that time we talked about many things, including but not limited to sex, especially as I was supposed to stay the night and we wanted everything to be on the table. Open communication, you know. Well, I also offhandedly mentioned a sex toy, magic wand, that I had always wanted to try, but never had the chance. So over the next week we are chatting, and he mentions a couple of times that, if everything goes the way he wants it to, we would be a couple by the end of the weekend, and that he wants us to be exclusive. I told him both times to hold up, slow down, we've only been on one date. Well, as the week goes on he gets worse about it, and I get progressively less interested. And about halfway through the week I get a screenshot from him of a purchase he made from an online sex toy retailer. He says he's super excited. Meanwhile I'm getting a little weirdest out and getting less excited. I'd told him to slow down a number of times at that point. Friday rolls around and I end up messaging him and telling him I was no longer interested, that he's trying to move too fast for me. So he said no, just come up and have a chill evening. Nothing has to happen. So I reluctantly agree. We talk for a bit more, and he ends the conversation with, but I still expect exclusivity. So I sat on the conversation overnight, and couldn't sleep, because I was feeling anxious. So the next morning I messaged him, and told him I was no longer interested in visiting, that I felt he was moving too fast, and I couldn't provide him with what he was looking for, but I wished him luck. Well, that absolutely set him off. He absolutely freaked out at me, said now I'm sitting here on my bed crying, and I had no idea that's how you felt. Why didn't you say anything? I wish you had been honest. He then sent me a picture of the toy. So I called him out, told him I had been honest, and that I didn't appreciate being guilted, or that he sent me that picture to show me what I was missing regardless of if he meant it my way or not. He continued messaging me for the next few days until I blocked him. Then would message me every couple of months after finding a way to continue messaging me. Eventually I told him after a year, I don't know why you're still messaging me. We went on one date a year ago. He freaked out and said, I don't know why you're holding a grudge. I'm just here trying to be nice and you're being so rude. He had just told me about how he'd had a dream about me. Huge bullet dodged. My friend in college introduced me to a new girl on campus she just knew casually. She was sort of shy and quiet, which I don't mind, and, while she'd go out, she wasn't a crazy blackout party animal. She didn't seem to mind me drinking though, so that was okay. Turns out my friend didn't really know this girl at all, or she didn't see the side of her that I did. This girl had never had a serious boyfriend, and me being on a night on a white horse sort of kick decided to ask her out. That was a mistake. This girl was quiet and reserved in public, but in private, she started yelling at me, cussing me out, getting really angry about things that didn't seem to be very important. Then a month or two later, she started hitting me when she was going off. She also started saying things like, you're just a piece of shit and nobody likes you. And who would ever want to date you? I hate you sometimes. A lot of the time I didn't even know what set her off. It was confusing and very uncomfortable. Did I mention there was no sex? None. At all. Not even making out or anything. There was one incident though. Check this sheet out. This girl wasn't romantic and didn't want to talk about sex or have it etc. One night though, she came to my dorm, got naked, and laid on my bed. I was shocked for a minute, but then got naked and joined her. I kissed her, talked to her, touched her and went down on her etc, which received no reaction. In my experience, that's a bit odd. She also didn't touch me, try to give me a BJ, crawl on top of me, start playing with herself, none of that. I ended up getting on top of her, and right before I was about to enter her, I asked, so you did get on birth control, right? We had discussed that maybe a month or two ago, and she said she would. She says no she didn't. What the hell? I mean, if I hadn't stopped to ask, and why didn't she tell me before I was 1 second away from being inside her? So I stopped right there and got off of her. She said she didn't have condoms, and if I didn't have any, then she was leaving. I actually didn't have any, but that afternoon, we were right in front of the drugstore in town. If she had an idea that this was going to be going down, perhaps she should have mentioned that. Anyways, she just got up, got dressed, and started to leave. I said next time I'll have condoms, but since this is both our faults, would you help me out? I mean, I would have gone down on her again if she had wanted me to, but she didn't seem to want that at all. She just said no. Why would I help you out with anything like that? I was left to finish myself off and wonder about what the hell that was all about. That was the only time anything like that ever happened with her. I left her after a few months because something was really wrong with her, and she was really a good / nice / sweet person. Not to be an ass or anything, but she didn't deserve me. I wasn't full to bursting with self-confidence, so it took a little while for that to sink in for me. The kicker is that once I left her, I found an amazing girl I totally clicked with, and it was great. It was great until my ex started pretty much stalking me and lying to people about me, including the new girl. It got really bad, and she broke up with me, which almost killed me. I didn't get over that girl for years. The thing is, once the crazy ex managed to destroy my relationship that I was really happy in, she didn't even make a move to try and get me back. Not that I would have done that anyways. I wish I had never met that crazy bitch. Had been dating a guy for a few months, and we got to a party one of my friends was having. It was just a backyard bonfire thing. There were 4 other couples there. The guys go pee in the woods at the edge of the property, and the girls were going inside to go to the bathroom. Everyone is hanging out, having a good time, drinking, etc. I go inside to go to the bathroom. One of the girls is in the bathroom, so I wait for her to come out. One of the other girls also comes in, so we are standing in the hallway talking. First girl comes out, I go inside bathroom to do my business, I come out. The other 2 girls are still chatting, and we laugh for a minute. I see dude standing at the other end of the hall, and he's freaking out. I go to see what the issue is, and he starts quietly going off on me that I just let two dudes fuck me in the bathroom. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? All the guys are outside with you. And he keeps going off, getting louder that I'll let these guys run a train on me in the bathroom. We leave right then, and he's going off the entire ride home. And I'm like, what the fuck? How, even? Like, did they hide in the bathtub while the other girls were going on and out? And he couldn't realize that all of the other guys were accounted for outside where he had been. So I dropped him off at home and bounced out to that one. I had to meet up with him to get some of my stuff later, and he kept insisting, you can't convince me nothing happened in the bathroom. Turns out, he was a massive alcoholic. I had my suspicions, but really got to see a different side of him. He put me through some craziness those months we were together. I went through a horrific heart-rending breakup about a decade back, then was unfortunately latched onto by a sociopath and abuser a few years later. Went from serious psychological torture and warfare between two people who really should never have fought in the first place, to straight up gaslighting and domestic and psychological abuse. Me and the person in the previous relationship, told people that we didn't care less about what happened to the other, but the moment something really bad or traumatic happened we appeared in each other's lives, like we were summoned by ritual. And we do love each other, we just can't talk. Anyway, after this nurture/nihilism treatment, and then seeking therapy, to find out the extent of the damage that EV did to me, it transpired that the only reason I'd shrugged it off, because the first relationship had seen such horror visited upon me it seemed amateurish. Since then in 2015 I ran into two people displayed massive red flags of having been turned into sociopathic abusers, and got the hell out of there. I hasten to add this isn't an attack on women. Men abuse far more often than the opposite sex. I just unfortunately tried to pick up the pieces, and got kicked around as a result. Because of the abuse they suffered they're now on a subconscious revenge trip. I laugh now, but I taught women self-defense techniques and we were talking earlier today about the time my ex hit me with a right cross out of nowhere, while my hands were at my sides. I just turned to look at her, and said your punching's too weak, if you ever get attacked by a guy, aim at the throat. Turned around in front of my stunned friends, who were unable to react due to shock, picked up my keys, and left the house for 3 days. They were visiting from abroad. It was my house I left. I slept next to a campfire at -10°C in the woods next town over, middle of January. It was that, or throw her out, and I'd just look like the bad guy. I'm glad I've learned to see these folk for what they are. Lost,